Order. This is the April 2025 meeting of the North Carolina Coastal Resources Commission. This time, the State Government Ethics Act mandates at the beginning of any meeting, the chair remind all the members of their duty to avoid conflicts of interest and inquire as to whether any member knows of any conflict of interest or potential conflict with respect to matters to come before the commission. If any member knows of conflict of interest or potential conflict, please state so as we call the roll. Angela?
Renee Cahoon.
Present, no known conflicts.
Neil Andrew.
Present, no known conflict.
Larry Baldwin.
Present, no known conflict.
D.R. Bryan.
Present, no known conflict.
Bob Emery.
Present, no conflict.
Jordan Hennessy.
Present, no known conflict.
Robert Hyde.
Present, no conflict.
Sheila Holman.
Present, no known conflict.
Steve King. Lauren Sullivan.
Present, no conflict.
Steve Shuttleworth. Earl Smith.
President, I have two items on the agenda for Ocean Island Beach that I'll need to recuse for because I own property there.
Okay, thank you. At the appropriate time, when the matter comes up, a motion will be made to recuse you. Thank you.
Robbie Yates.
Present and no known conflicts.
Any conflicts, Commissioner King? Nope, you're right here on the end, and that's 12, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. For my comments are going to be very brief. I'd like to thank everybody for coming up and attending the meeting, as well as our visitors that are here. I'd also like to recognize and welcome DEQ General Counsel Dan Hirschman. Dan, thank you for coming. We appreciate you making the drive down.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. All right, next up is the approval of the February 26th and 27th CRC meeting minutes. A motion will be made to approve or note any changes that are necessary.
Motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Motion by Commissioner Andrews, or a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Holman. Any further discussion? All in favor? All opposed? It is unanimous. Thank you. Next up would be approval of the February 27th, 2025 closed session minutes. Mary has passed those out. And a motion will be needed to approve the minutes of that closed session.
I'll make a motion to approve those closed session meeting minutes.
Thank you. Is there a
I'll
second?
second.
Motion by Commissioner Andrews, seconded by Commissioner Holman. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor? All opposed? It is unanimous. Thank you all very much. Bobby, thank you for hosting us for this meeting, and it was a good, active CRAC meeting this morning. We'll look forward to your report.
Thank you, and welcome everybody to Dare County. If there's anything we can do to help you and make your stay better, let me know. We've got some people here, and we'll be glad to help you out however we can. At our CRAC meeting this morning, we elected officers. Since I'm giving the report, I was elected as the chair again, and Spencer Rogers and Webb Fuller were the vice chairs elected as well. So we have the same officers that we've had for the past year as well. We had three things on our agenda. One of them got postponed. We had talked to you all at the last meeting about the Sentinel site discussion. For a number of reasons, that got postponed because we didn't get the final information that we needed for that to start looking at that. So that'll come up again at our next meeting, and we'll deal with it then. The second thing on our agenda was a proposed rule for artificial turf grass. We went through a lot of the history of that, of why we have the buffer rules, what the rules are, what the exceptions are, why we have the exceptions, all of those things. We looked at the environmental concerns that are addressed with the buffer rules and so on. So we had a nice long PowerPoint presentation by Jonathan Lucas that sort of educated us further on that. And as we went through it, there were basically 2 or 3 decision points we had to make. One was, do we just not regulate it at all? 2, do we keep the status quo? And 3, do we move it to where we allow it in the AEC or add rules, those kind of things. After a lot of discussion, the consensus of the CRAC was, and the recommendation to you all is to leave the rules as they are, to not change them, to keep the buffer rules in place, and that we're satisfied where they are and don't recommend any changes to you. That was done by vote. That wasn't done by lack of a motion or anything like that. We voted on that, and the vote was unanimous to proceed in that manner. The second thing that we had on our agenda was an update on the shore lock that you all we talked about in our last meeting. Cameron went through what they had done with the shore lock group. I could go through a lot of stuff, but the long and the short of what came from all that is that there's very little information and very little science yet on that. They're aware of the shortcomings. They've had meetings, with the resource agencies. All of them have been involved in those discussions. And so before anything can happen or before anybody can make an application, there's got to be some more information about impacts and what it does, how it works, those kind of things. And that it will go on. In terms of the next step, there'll be another interagency discussion. They'll sort of narrow down what's needed and what's missing. They'll give that feedback to Shorelock, and then Shorelock folks will sort of be in their camp to decide what they're going to do next. If they're actively going to pursue using something like this, then they've got to do those studies and get that science to get us as the CRAC, but you all as the CRC comfortable that whatever it is can be done in a way that is acceptable and safe and all those kind of things. And so a lot of work to be done. It's not over. Again, if they're interested in doing this in North Carolina, then they're going to have to do right much work to get us there, and we'll see where it leads. In terms of the CRAC, we didn't take any action and haven't asked for anything else. It was kind of in Shorelock's court now to move the process on. They know where they are. They know what they need, and so we'll see what, if anything, comes of it. And maybe as they move forward, we'll have some more discussions about this into the future. That was really all that we had on our, that seems like not much, but that took a good hour and a half to go through what I just did in 5 minutes. Any questions about any of that?
Does anyone have any questions for Bobby? You had a lot of good discussion this morning.
I thought so as well.
Interesting public comments as well, so.
So, again, I don't have any issues left on our agenda other than the Sentinel site for our next meetings. If you all have things that you would like for us to look at, please let us know. Before we have the agenda meeting, I generally send an email out to the members of the CRAC and ask them if they have agenda items too, so I can let you all know at the agenda meeting. But if you do, then let us know, and I'll let you know if anything comes up from our end.
Neil?
I just have a comment. Always enjoy coming to Dare County, and for all the years that I've been on the CRC and we've been coming to Dare County, I'm pretty sure this is the warmest day we've ever had for a CRC meeting in Dare County. So I appreciate the slight adjustment in the calendar schedule for our Dare County meeting.
It's worked out well. Thank you very much.
Good to have you here.
Hopefully it will continue for a while. DR?
One last thing, for tomorrow's field trip, we have a 12-passenger van available. We also have a Suburban that'll seat about 6. And so we've got enough to accommodate all of you all that want to go on the field trip, and we'll have that here ready to go for you. And I don't know, I'll let you organize how you go where, who rides what, but we have transportation available for anybody who wants to go down there. So
Okay, thank you. I hope the commission members will take advantage of this. It should be an interesting field trip, both to the jetty that's down there at Buxton, as well as you'll see the impacts of some of the stuff that the military has left behind down there that keeps resurfacing,
all
as
right.
well as Rodanthe as we go by.
All right. Any questions for me?
DR?
So I'm not sure if this is the question for you or for Renee, but I think after the CRAC had the vote on the artificial turf, there was some question and comment from folks in Brunswick County who had the local permit officers are having a lot of difficulty with the people putting in, I'm just going to call it artificial grass, on the lots that back up to canals. So one of the pictures we saw was the artificial turf going up next to a concrete bulkhead. And one of the comments was that that's a lot different from, I'll say, a stream bed in Dare County or any stream bed anywhere. And I'm just curious to see whether you think that the CRAC would be okay with us having some more discussion about seeing if maybe the staff could come up with a different standard for us to consider for those, say, lots backing up to canals with concrete pilings. It just seems like it's really causing some problems for the local permit officers, and it just seems like we ought to try to see if we can't figure something out.
May I offer a suggestion to move forward? Is have staff present the difficulties on different shorelines to the CRAC to come back through us.
So I guess my response would be a little bit different. What came to us to consider was a blanket change to the rule to allow this artificial turf. And what we heard was the science didn't support that. There were purposes for those buffers and that the artificial turf didn't meet those purposes. And so the CRAC said, no, we're not going to go for that because we think those purposes are, I'm paraphrasing in my words, not theirs, but that's where we wound up. In the discussion that you're referencing, I think I mentioned if somebody from Brunswick County has an idea that they need and they think will work and that it meets the conditions and the reasons why we have that buffer, nothing stops them from petitioning for a rule change or asking for a variance or whatever. And then we can consider it. And if we consider it and they've got the science to back it up, then we can make recommendations to you. It's kind of hard for us to go out and pick and choose where the problems are, or what the problems are, or what they might be, and then try to do a different rule for each place. But if there's a situation like you have and that person wants to do it and they can show us that what they're doing meets the reasons why you have the buffers, then I would guess we'd be okay with that. If it doesn't meet the reasons, then I would guess, given today's discussion, we would not be okay with that.
One of the things I heard out of that this morning was that they're denying the permits for this and people are doing it anyway. And they claim they don't have enough staff to go out and deal with all the people that are doing it anyway. That's part of the reason.
Well, I mean, I think there is some malfeasance, but there's also, Joe and Nancy have turf 3 doors down. So somebody doesn't know they need a permit, they go put turf in, and then it puts a LPO in a difficult position to.
Well, and the other thing that it didn't come up in the discussion, or maybe it did and I didn't catch it, but in talking to the folks from Brunswick County after the meeting was over, one of the issues that they have with that is when they're showing the rule to the people that want to put in the artificial turf, they can't nothing in the rule says it's not landscaping. There's an interpretation that is, I guess, by a letter or memo or whatever from the CRC saying that it's not landscaping, but they can't show them a rule to that effect. And so what the question from them was, can we do something specific in the rule that says it is not landscaping, so that they can pull the book out and say, here, it says so right here, it's not landscaping. And I said, well, if that's what you want, then ask for it and we'll look at it. That was not what was asked of us when we started the process. So we'll see where that goes.
Tancred, in response to that, can we put the definition in the rule or do we need to do an amendment to the rule?
To put a definition, it would be an amendment to put a definition
Okay.
into the rule.
Maybe that's something to look at. Larry?
This discussion as it progresses, it's this 30-foot buffer. I mean, what's the purpose of it? And also within the rule, like they mentioned, this sounds very familiar with what the Division of Water Quality went through with stormwater and stormwater infiltration. And it's over the years, I mean, that has completely changed. I mean, to where they allow permeable pavement. There's a lot of innovative technology out there now to allow infiltration of surfaces that are travelable, but do allow infiltration. This sounds like something that's kind of trending that way of the purpose of the rule for the
Well,
buffer.
That was a discussion that we did have
Yeah.
a little bit, and that is that if in that 30-foot buffer, if you wanted to put artificial turf, and if you had it's permeable turf and everything, and you could collect all the runoff and you could treat it and you could make sure it didn't get back into water flow and all that, would we allow it? And the answer is, if you want to do that, bring it to us and show us that it works and let's look at it and maybe we would allow it. Or you would allow it. But that hasn't been brought, and it seems like to me that to put 30 feet of turf in, you're going to spend a whole lot of money to try to capture stormwater for
Permeable
a small
pavement's
amount of
not-
benefit.
Permeable pavement's not cheap either.
Yeah,
It's
so
very expensive.
anyway, so that, we did have that discussion, and if an applicant or a property owner wants to pursue that, then I'm sure it's something we'd look at.
Bob?
I think what I took away from today was that, yes, that the artificial grass can be permeable, but what's running through it is oftentimes sediment with nutrients and other pollutants bound up with the sediment, and that the plants themselves, the roots of the plants, can then help process the pollutants that permeated. And so it's not, the buffer doesn't just serve as a permeable surface, but it also processes the pollutants. And it's the plants that are in the buffer that are key to that processing. So that's what I took away from today's discussion.
I'm sure the subject isn't closed. I'm sure that it will come back. And I think the suggestion about if Brunswick County wishes to make some changes, that, bring something forward.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Angry?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon to the commission. Good afternoon to the advisory council, staff, visitors, folks online. Good to be here. Thanks again, Dare County, for hosting. Thanks to Christy and Gwen at the back for running the online for us. Again, just want to get and recognize Dan Hirschman. Dan, I can happy to see the minute of my time to you if you want to come say hello and introduce yourself.
Sure. Thank you, Director Miller. Thank you, Chair Cahoon. Thank you, commissioners, for welcoming me here today. Greetings from Raleigh and the new leadership at DEQ. I'm very excited to be working with you all and on a lot of the issues facing the coast. Just so you know where I come from, I spent the last 18 years working at the North Carolina Department of Justice in the Environmental Division with your counsel, Mary Lucas, and with Christy. So I'm no stranger to some of the issues that you all deal with, but I'm looking forward to getting more deeply immersed in them. So again, just want to thank you for welcoming me here, and I look forward to working with you.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
So I'll start off today with a legislative update. We are tracking a number of bills. Two of them in particular I want to highlight for you. First is Senate Bill 665, and this would amend state permitting for upland marina basins. It would allow, as far as CAMA and dredge and fill are concerned, it would allow for elimination of 10% of the linear footage of coastal wetlands along that shoreline, and then 5% of the aerial square footage of coastal wetlands on the project site. It also would not require any buffer at all, speaking of buffers, no buffer at all along the newly created shoreline within that basin. So those are the sort of the concerns that we've voiced on that bill, and we will continue to track that as it moves forward. There are other pieces involved on EMC and DWR side. It amends their permitting to some degree as well. It exempts any stormwater runoff requirements for that project, and then it does also some water quality standard clarifications or amendments. The second bill is Senate Bill 734, and this one's titled Clarifying Estuarine Waters AEC under CAMA. I know this bill obviously bears some resemblance to what you've seen recently in your petition for rulemaking and the declaratory ruling request that came in the last couple of meetings, but it's much more expansive than those two that you've seen before. So what this bill would do is it would exempt all development within any man-made feature, man-made, excavated, or altered features. So for example, in any man-made ditch, canal, pond, etc., none of your rules would apply. Anything could be built without complying with any of your standards. Anything could be dredged without complying with any of your standards. So this, for example, would apply in finger canals, because as the rules currently written, nothing that's been man-made or modified would be under CRC jurisdiction any longer. So this would be a very, very big deal. And I think, this is one that we really want to pay attention to, because it has a great impact to undermine the CAMA and the dredge and fill in any water body that's been modified, altered, or man-made. So I think it goes beyond the title of the bill for sure, and certainly goes beyond what you all were asked to consider at the last couple of meetings. We do have a man-made dish discussion on your agenda for later on today, so we can get more into this topic this afternoon. On the regulatory side, the Corps of Engineers, just a couple projects, Corps of Engineers submitted a federal consistency determination to the division for a long-term maintenance plan for the Hatteras Inlet navigation system. This includes the Ralston Channel and Hatteras Ferry connecting channel. What this would do is significantly expand basically the footprint in which the Corps could dredge and maintain that channel, so that they could have flexibility to follow the natural deep water instead of coming back every time and ask for a small amendment to get outside of the previously authorized area. They would maintain the same 1 foot width of that channel and 10 to 12 foot depth of channel. They would place material from there into both existing as well as new proposed disposal areas. And so we're currently evaluating this. We've reached out to the partners and the other agencies. The state's looking at this, and we have to make a determination by May 26th on that one. The Mid-Currituck Bridge application is still under review. We did 2 public comment sessions in March and April to receive input, one in Dare County, one in Currituck County. We have a June 6th statutory deadline to make a determination on that permit application, so that's what we're working towards. Next week, we'll have a 2-day workshop for LPOs for the Central and Southern District. This will be at Hammocks Beach State Park, and there'll be field work at Bear Island. This is a routine training that we offer for our LPOs. We cover rule updates, do hands-on training in the field. We do back and forth dialogue and discussion, make sure everybody's on the same page, understanding how the rules are written and how they're to be implemented. The LPO's attendance at these workshops is actually a part of their contract with the division to run the programs. Switching to the planning and resiliency section, we certified 4 land use plans since your February meeting. Towns of Newport, Kitty Hawk, Gainesville, and Onslow County. And then we certified 3 land use plan amendments, 1 for Currituck County and 2 for Morehead City. A couple of grant program updates. The pre-application period for the 25-26 Public Beach and Waterfront Access Grant Program closed on Friday. We received 21 applications totaling $4.2 million in requests. So that's more than double the $2 million we have available for that program. It remains a very popular program, and we're very happy to support that going forward. Final applications will be due on July 31st, once those folks are notified. On the Resilient Coastal Communities Program, RCCP, we received 43 local government applications for support through that program. 24 for vulnerability assessment, 16 engineering design, and 3 for construction. 10 of those local governments are requesting support to incorporate resiliency into their land use plans. That's a new feature that we've added into this round of the RCCP, where we can help folks do the land use plan updates if they're going to incorporate resiliency into those. We had 19 companies that applied to provide the support for the program. Out of these 19, 10 of these are brand new. So we've had, a lot of interest on the private sector side as well as the local government side. To date, that program has helped 41 communities. So just with this round, 43, we're more than doubling the number of communities that are interested in receiving support through that program. We have roughly 7.7 million available for grants in this round. We're reviewing applications from now going forward, and we'll be announcing those awards as soon as possible. We are inviting the public to submit comments on DCM's draft 2026 through 2030 program assessment and strategy. This is under section 309 of the CCMA. This is a 5-year assessment that the division undertakes to look at opportunities for program enhancements. And this is defined under statute. There are 9 enhancement areas. We evaluate each of those areas. So for example, coastal access or coastal wetlands or coastal hazards or planning, marine debris. We evaluate all these agencies, all these different activities. We go out to the public, we get input, and then we try to incorporate that input into that draft assessment and strategy. So that process, that draft has been completed. It's on our website. It's available for review and comment. And there's also a notice outside if people want to get more information about that. Daniel is heading up that project with another staff member, Anya. And we'll be moving forward to get that adopted on the timeline. One piece of good news on this planning and resiliency stuff is I'm going to steal some thunder and announce Coastal Land Trust closed yesterday on South Topsail Tract. This is, as you know, one of the last remaining undeveloped, untouched parcels of land on a barrier island in the state. It's about 124 acres, depending how you measure it, but pretty substantial piece of land. Coastal Land Trust went through a very long campaign to raise the funds, a lot of grant applications, a lot of local support. The community really chipped in to fund this acquisition. The Coastal Land Trust intent is to settle up all the accounts. They had to do a little bridge loan to close the deal, but their intent long-term in next year or so is to transfer that land at no cost to the state to be managed by the Division for Public Access and Environmental Protection. So we're very grateful for that partnership with Coastal Land Trust. We think it's a wonderful thing for the state of North Carolina and everyone who visits that area. Coastal Reserve rules. This is NC 15A NCAC 070. These are scheduled to be reviewed by the Rules Review Commission in April 2026 as part of the periodic review under 150B. These rules are administered by the department, not by the commission. So the reserve will be seeking input on classification of these rules and the process, any changes from their local advisory committees, as well as the CRC this spring, in order to inform the department's classification of the rules as they move to public comment later on this summer. The reserve also hosted a couple of workshops earlier this month. One is a coastal explorations educative workshop, and then a low impact development training for realtor associations in the Cape Fear and Brunswick County. They're doing spring student field trips to the Rachel Carson Reserve and Masonboro Island Reserve, and summer camps at Rachel Carson will start in June in partnership with the North Carolina Maritime Museum. There are 2 stops planned this year on the Discover the Coastal Reserve tour, Masonboro Island and Kitty Hawk Woods, which is going to be rescheduled, has been rescheduled. This continues a multi-year campaign spanning 2023 to 2026. And the goal is to connect audiences with the reserve's programs and places. CRC and CRAC members should be receiving invitations to these events, and please let us know if you have not. Be happy to make sure you get those invitations. A little bit of staff news. We had Cole Barrow, who joined us in March as a new field rep in the Morehead City office, came to us from the Carteret County Planning and Development Department, where he worked as a planner. Hannah Mitchell started in our Wilmington office in March after working at the Public Water Supply section in Wilmington for the last 2 years. The Wilmington office is still short-staffed on field reps, and we're working to fill those. We continue to do interviews and work with our HR to get those filled as quickly as we can. Jennifer Fickler is joining DCM. in May as a coastal resilience specialist working on the RCCP with Mackenzie and Keeson. And Rachel Long transitioned from her temporary role into the division's accounting technician role and is doing a great job for us in Morehead City. We'll have several interns working on stewardship and research projects with the reserves in Manteo, Beaufort, and Wilmington this summer, thanks to support from the Friends of the Reserve, the internship program, and UNCW. Madam Chair, this brings us to the budget. The state budget process continues to play out. We've seen the governor's budget. We've seen the Senate proposal. We'll continue to wait to see where that process goes as that develops. On the federal side, we're continuing to operate under a continuing budget resolution passed by Congress last month to fund the federal government through the end of fiscal year 2025, September 30th of this year. This includes grants to the states for coastal management and the reserves. For DCM, federal funding represents about $3.8 million per year, and this funds about 50% of our annual budget. It supports 31% of our staff, 52% of our staff. The details of how these funds will be allocated are not yet finalized. We'll hopefully know more in the coming weeks as Congress makes that final decision. And then we also continue to monitor the federal FY26 budget process. So due to this budget uncertainty, we've implemented a number of cost-saving measures at the staff level, some stricter limits on travel and purchases, and we also may need to think about other measures that we could undertake. For example, commission meetings run about $15,000 a year. So that's a place where in the past, when we've had either no federal budget or problems on the state side, we've had to look at options to meet. Now we have visual options that maybe makes it a little bit easier, but just something that could be necessary as we continue down this budget process. Speaking of meetings, obviously your next meeting is rapidly approaching. Christine knows that all too well. I think today is the variance deadline for the next meeting, so it's right around the corner. It's scheduled for June 11th and 12th. We don't have a location yet, Madam Chair. I know that's something that we can think about. I think agenda items that could come up would be the science panel's IHA report. Ken Richardson has his oceanfront erosion rate update, and then we have the reserve rules that I just mentioned. So not a whole lot of things if you wanted to do something, and maybe that's something you can talk about OT business. And Madam Chair, that concludes the staff's report. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Tancred. Does anyone have any questions for Tancred? Seeing none, thank you very much. Next up would be the variance, Ernest, North Topsail Beach, oceanfront setback. This is a carryover from our last meeting with some changes that have been made. Christie, the floor is yours.
And I want to apologize. Hopefully everybody saw my very late night email last night providing what should have been the proper staff recommendation on the positions of both sides on this one. I think I just grabbed an old file and renamed it, and it shouldn't have been there. So that's what we're working off of. We agree with the petitioners on all four criteria based on their redesign plan after last time. So just that's where we're headed. I wanted to make sure people had seen that email from last night. How do we get the PowerPoint up?
So this is not updated in our packets.
What the facts are correct in your packets, but
Okay.
the positions on the four are not, and that's what I emailed out late last night.
Okay.
And I'll be summarizing. Mr. Wright will be summarizing for petitioners. So I think it's pretty straightforward. And I'm sorry for anybody that spent the time reading this stuff.
You will find that all the positions are the same, both on petitioner and staff's part coming up.
Yeah. And so I'm going to have Jonathan Lucas come back up just to redo the PowerPoint to refamiliarize yourself after February, and then I'll run through the facts and the real positions. Thanks.
Thank you, Christie.
Afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the commission. Jonathan Lucas again, here to take another look at this variance request for an applicant, 1180 New River Inlet Road in North Topsail Beach. requesting a variance to the oceanfront setback rules. So here is a zoomed out view of the property showing its location in regard to New River Inlet in Onslow County. Here is a look more zoomed in at the property in relationship to its neighbors and New River Inlet Road, both in 2018 and in 2020. And then again in 2024, the most recent overhead imagery. Here is a look at the lot with the still remaining standing part of the structure. Standing pictures taken standing on New River Inlet Road, looking towards the dune and the ocean. Here is a view looking down the beach with the ocean off to the left of your screen. Here's a view standing on the beach itself, looking back at the property and toward New River Inlet Road. Here's a view looking up the beach with the ocean to your right. This is a look at the first line of stable natural vegetation. And then another look from a different angle where our flags are. These are both the erosion rates and previous vegetation lines. This is the plot plan showing first line of stable natural vegetation and 3 different setback lines. And then here is a zoomed in view of the footprint of the home showing the same setback lines and looking more closely at the actual portions of the home.
Jonathan, wait just a minute. Jordan, is there
Can we get these brought up on our screens here?
no, we're not connected to the Dare County system. Sorry for the interruption, Jonathan.
And then here are the variance criteria. Thanks.
Thank you. There were links on the website to both the February packet that you reviewed at that meeting and then just sort of the amended packet, which has the new facts and that now the corrected positions. Not to belabor the old facts, this was the house, the neighbor's house burned down, hers was damaged. She got it fixed, then hers burned down. And so you saw what was remaining on the site. They had applied for a permit with a first design that was denied. Ahead of the February variance, they redesigned it a little bit, and that's what we talked about at the February meeting. You then asked for more information as we were kind of trying to design a third design sort of on the fly. So the petitioners went back after your February meeting, worked with their home designer to come up with now a final design. And that's what we're talking about now. And that was the 2 slides that we saw. And I don't know that that's easy to see from where you are, but I'll put it up at least for now. So I'm coming forward on the additional stipulated facts, and then I'll get into positions, and then Mr. Wright can come up and talk about petitioner's positions on these. So you voted at your February meeting to hold this variance petition open and invited the petitioner and DCM to come up with additional new facts. After the variances at your last meeting, the commission reviewed the proposed amendments to 7H0309, which has in it the quote grandfather exception to the setback. And currently that had 1,000 square foot footprint maximum or a 2,000 total square foot maximum, which you suggested, at least in the draft rules, to bump up to 2,500 square feet. So those are rules that have not gone through the process yet, but at least have gone through a vote of you all. So they're not yet effective. Ms. Ernest then revised her site plans to comply more with the new language, the proposed language of 0309B. To do this, they pulled back the house all the way to the rear driveway easement area, so it was pulled back further. They did a reduction in the total floor area proposed from 2,800 square feet to 2,460 square feet. So it was made smaller and under that 2,500 square foot benchmark that you were proposed. And then also modified the back deck so that it would be structurally independent and uncovered as allowed by the rules. These modified house plans are included in the materials. They're dated March 12th of this year. And like I said, did those three things: pulled it back, made it smaller, and it's also no further forward than the two adjacent houses. As it's proposed, the footprint is located 73.5 feet landward of the vegetation on one side and 74 of the vegetation on the other side of the width of that lot. Also, as a part of this process, petitioners sent letters re-notifying their adjacent landowners of this third and final design. They received from one of their adjacent neighbors a new statement of support that's included in the materials, and also from a non-adjacent but nearby property owner as well. That's included in the materials. Also, we spoke with Ken Richardson after the meeting to ask him, were there any changes in the erosion rate based on these 2025 maps that you all will see it probably at your next meeting, whenever that is. So those maps are not yet adopted by you or gone through rulemaking or any of that, but they're an update to the erosion rates. And it also is looking at different calculation methodology. I'm going to read this because this is Ken, this is not me. The state is expected to transition from the endpoint method, which has been used since 1980 and relies on only 2 shoreline data points, to the least squares regression method, which incorporates multiple shoreline measurements for a more comprehensive analysis. This shift will better account for short-term shoreline fluctuations, which the endpoint method overlooks. So since 1980, the erosion setback factors at this site in particular have ranged from 2 to 3 feet per year, with 4 of the last 7 studies at 3 feet per year at the site. However, with this proposed 2025 study, it would have this site at 2 feet per year. So not in effect yet, but certainly that's helpful information to know that under this new methodology, that will probably be the eventual setback factor for the site. So those are the new facts. On the staffs and petitioners criteria, do you need to do anything with that? Okay. Like I said, we agree on all 4 of the factors in the version that we sent out last night. So just to quickly summarize, on the first criteria, to strict rule application of the rules of the commission results in an unnecessary hardship. Staff agrees that yes, it does. The intent of these rules is minimizing losses to life and property resulting from storms and long-term erosion, preventing encroachment of permanent structures on the public beach areas, preserving the natural ecological conditions of the barrier dune and beach systems, and reducing the public costs of inappropriately sited development. Staff agrees that the strict setback in this case may result in an unnecessary hardship where petitioner has redesigned her project and pulled the structure landward to the driveway easement and has designed it under 2,500 square feet, which is the number that you discussed at your last meeting. So the current design has limited size and is pulled back further landward and is not forward than either adjacent house. On the second factor regarding whether hardships are a result of conditions peculiar to the property, staff agree yes. While primarily the problem is long-term erosion, which takes place at the site, and the impact storms have had on the location of the vegetation line, the new rates will likely change from 3 feet a year to 2 feet a year if the 2025 draft maps go into effect. And staff agree that that could be viewed as a peculiarity of the site and its calculated average annual erosion rates. On the third factor, did petitioners cause their hardships? Staff says no. Petitioner's final proposal for a home, which is approximately 2,500 square feet and is set back on the lot all the way and is no further forward. Staff acknowledged this final size and location seek to pull the home further landward and is not an increase in total square footage overall. Finally, on the fourth factor, spirit, purpose, and intent, staff agreed granting a variance to the petitioner to vary the oceanfront setback rules. to allow a structure that's pulled back and smaller. It does meet a setback of approximately 7 feet landward of the vegetation line, and then that would be consistent with the spirit, purpose, and intent of the commission's rules. The commission has made limited exceptions for some type of development to be located oceanward of the setback, including the minimum 60-foot setback grandfather exception that's in your rules now. While that currently has a 2,000 square foot limit, you're looking to change that. You're also looking to remove the 1979 date in your current draft that's moving along. So based on that, staff would agree that yes, it does meet the spirit, purpose, and intent of the rules. Staff acknowledged that the petitioner's current design pulls the structure landward, is smaller, is not further forward. It meets the 70-foot setback from the vegetation line, so it is definitely more closely aligned with your current setback rules than the 2 previous versions of her plan. Staff do note that we continue to have concerns that the town of North Topsail Beach does not have a federally authorized project, a beach plan, or a static line exception. It's just had the 1 round of nourishment at the site. But on balance, staff believe that this design minimizes our concerns about public safety and welfare and substantial justice. So I'm going to ask Mr. Wright to come on up and to speak on petitioners' positions on the 4 factors, and then we're happy to take questions.
Thank you, Christy. Good afternoon, Clark.
Good afternoon. I'm going to limp up here because I tore my Achilles tendon running on the beach this morning. Good afternoon. I'm Clark Wright with Davis Hartman Wright out of Newbern. And I very much appreciate where we've ended up on this. And I'd like to, since he's not here, to thank Commissioner Shuttleworth as well for having the wisdom to help argue for tabling this in light of the rules that y'all were going to consider and ultimately approved amending the next day back at the February meeting. I can't help it. 40 years ago, a fella came into my law office, or when I was just an associate, and plunked down $5,000 in cash and $100 bills and said, I want to build a project on Topsail, and heard that Dick Titus and Bernie Harrell were plugged in with the Republicans. And since we have a Republican governor then, anyhow, Dick and Bernie said, oh, well, we're happy to take your money. And Clark, since we don't know a darn thing about this, you figure it out. Thus began my foray into camel law. And now here we are in the same area 40 years later, with in between being offshore drilling and military airspace and sea level rise and 100 other things. Anyhow, this commission does really important work. And I've watched it unfold for 4 decades now. And other than the fact that it looks like driving through Myrtle Beach, going through that section, coming up the highway, this area is still beautiful, and CAMA's a big part of that. I really don't think I need to say much. I would like to offer to answer any questions. I do want to mention that because of Christie's comments, don't forget to vote on doing away with the need to request a local variance, to do that first. And then another comment I'd like to make is, well, I'd like to personally thank my associate, Samantha Hamilton, who I hope you're going to see a lot more of, and you might enjoy that more than me. But she couldn't make it today, but she did a great job from everybody I've spoken to and from watching on YouTube back in February. Only 4 factors. I would like to make an observation, and I guess, Mary, this is more directed to you, that consider including some of petitioners' amended position points in the final order, assuming we get a positive vote. But that's not going to change anything materially. Our client is glad to have seen the changes, and it was actually Samantha who caught the mistake last night, so that's another kudos to her. Y'all have any questions?
Does anyone have any questions for either Clark or Christie at this time? Jordan?
Yes. I have a question. What would the setback be? I think I heard Christie say that it would be 2 foot. Is that the new
Yeah,
erosion rate?
can we pull back up the color
You
layout?
can't see it. so-
There we go. Well, I guess that doesn't do you much good.
So what would the setback be if that was in place?
If the new maps go through the process and get approved by rules review and are adopted as rules, once that happens, the setback rate factor here is 2 feet per year. So if you're 5,000 square foot or less, the setback is 60. Measured landward from, in this case, the vegetation line, because that's more restrictive than the static line.
Right.
And you do have that in your packet. It's got different colors on it to hopefully make it a little easier to highlight. But if you look at,
House plans exhibit.
if you look at that house plans exhibit, you've got green, yellow, and brown. And the project as proposed is landward of the blue line, which is the 60-foot setback, and is essentially landward of 75-foot line, and does intrude into the 90 feet, which will probably soon become 60 feet. Because of the time that will be required to get through the APA, and who knows, maybe even some further litigation with the RRC, that's, if you will, my anticipated answer to, well, why don't you just wait? And also our client's waited a long time already and has suffered through, at least relative to her, some incredible hardships with regard to this property. So I hope you will vote in favor, and thank you very much for letting me ramble a little bit.
Thank you, Clark. Anyone else?
Just a statement then. So essentially, if we fast forward and those setback erosion rates go in effect, it would be a 60-foot setback. So she could build up to a 5,000 square foot house if that was in place today, right?
Right.
Correct.
What's
So
in place today is 90 feet right now.
90 feet. That's
Yeah.
why she's having to come and get a variance,
Correct.
which is about 75 feet back, right?
And then
And then,
I think I'm okay not violating client confidences. We discussed, the fact that, well, what could we potentially build after the rules are codified on the exceptions to 309 and the new erosion rates are truly finalized? And my answer to her was, there's always the minor and major modification process, but a bird in the hand's worth many in the bush. And she's anxious to get started. And so we request that the commission grant this variance. And then in the future, there may be some potential to modify these plans. But I think it's a good plan as it is.
I'd like to ask her a question. It sounds like to me the petitioner has already made quite a few concessions to, so the new floor plan is 2,470 feet. So it's actually under 2,500 square feet.
Correct.
Which changes the rule, gives you even more leniency on the setback. Am I correct?
Yes, sir, Commissioner Yates.
Although currently the limitation is 2,000 square feet in your rules that they are today.
Right, but the commission has approved to change that. It's just got to be codified. And we know the distance of that.
Just, yes.
Right.
And
Which
we
these
also know the
days,
distance of that. It sounds like
again-
to me the petitioner has already gone through enough pain and agony of this deal. That, I'd like to make the motion that we would accept this variance.
Commissioner, we have one more piece of housekeeping before we get there. We need to grant the variance from them getting local permission first. So a motion would be needed to grant a waiver of their local requirement.
I move to waive the local variance request.
Is there a second? Seconded by DR. Any further discussion? All in favor? All opposed? That is approved. Next would be the vote on the first criteria, strict application of development rules, standards, or orders issued by the commission. Mr. Yates, would you like to make a motion on this to accept both staff and petitioner's argument?
If I word this properly, I'm not an attorney. But, yeah, I'd like to make the motion for petition 1.
Criteria 1, okay, for both staff.
Second.
Seconded by Jordan. Any further discussion? All in favor? All opposed? It is unanimous on criteria 1. Next will be criteria 2.
Before you move on, Chair Cahoon, if, just to clarify, as I heard that motion, it was to accept the yes positions of both staff and petitioner. I'd like that to be the case, and I just wanted to clarify that.
That's what was asked for in the motion. Yes.
Thank you.
Next up would be, criteria 2. Since staff and petitioner both have the same position, that would be the motion as well. Anybody wish to make that?
I move to accept the petitioner's position.
And staff, since they're both. agreed,
Petitioners,
They're in agreement.
fine.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Second by Commissioner Baldwin. Any further discussion? All in favor? All opposed? It is unanimous. Criteria 3, petitioner has or has not shown that hardships did not result from actions taken by the petitioner. Once again, both positions are the same, even though what's in our packet is not. It is corrected from last night's email. Is there a motion on criteria 3?
I move that we accept petitioner and staff position on criteria 3.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Commissioner Baldwin. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor? All opposed? It is unanimous. And finally, criteria 4, petitioner has or has not shown that the variance request is consistent with spirit, purpose, intent of the commission's rules, standards, or orders that will secure public safety and welfare and substantial justice. Once again, they are the same. Is there a motion? Bob?
I move that we accept petitioner and staff position on variance criteria 4.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Sheila will do it.
Second by Commissioner Holman. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor? All opposed? Variance is granted. Clark, thank your client. Thank you both. Thank you, Christie. And thanks to members of the commission who at the last meeting decided to change the square footage up to 2,500. We look forward to those rules moving forward. Next is the town of Ocean Isle Beach paving and oceanfront setback. Oh, before we start with this one, a motion will be needed to excuse Commissioner Smith from this discussion. So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Earl, you are excused. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mary. We still got a mouse back. Okay. This one is called.
OIB. Maybe. All right, so on this one, this is a variance request from the town of Ocean Isle Beach for some paving of some streets within the oceanfront setback at the east end of the island. The OIB attorney, Jonathan Ure, is here, and he's going to present their positions towards the end. First, we're going to have Jonathan. He's pitch hitting for Tara, who's on vacation this week, so he's going to present the PowerPoint on this one.
Thank you, Christie. Jonathan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon. We have lost, there we go. Now we're back. All right, as Chrissy said, I'm here to present the variance for Town of Ocean Isle Beach and some road paving in the oceanfront setback. Before you have a zoomed out picture of the project area. This next slide shows the project site that's located on East First Street between Winston-Salem Street and High Point Street. Star shows the location of the project area. This slide is a more zoomed in picture of the project site. Yellow line shows the area in question. Here's a photo taken of the project area on East First Street looking west. This was taken by the LPO on March 14th that shows the road in question. This is a zoomed out photo that's taken of the project area on East First Street that's looking west, again, taken on March 14th of this year. This next slide is also a photo of that area on East First Street, and this photo is looking east. It shows the gravel road. Here is another zoomed out photo that was taken of the project area. This is looking east and was taken on March 21st of this year. And another taken from High Point Street looking south towards East First Street and the Atlantic Ocean, taken on March 14th. Here's a more representative photo. It shows the subject area in red for this variance. And here is another photo that shows that same area.
And actually, I know a little more about the bottom picture. The bottom picture is showing the as-built of the created dune project that is in the facts that we'll talk about. But this is an aerial from the town showing the as-built.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And last, I will put up the variance criteria for you.
All right, so as we saw, the project is located along East First Street, Winston-Salem Street, and High Point Street in OIB. It includes paving East First about 800 feet. Winston-Salem Street is 70 feet, and High Point Street is 90 feet. The town owns the subject streets, as stated in some of the resolutions from the 80s that are included in your materials. Until May 6th of 1981, the subject streets were paved with asphalt and were maintained by DOT at that time. They remained asphalt paved roads until 1999 when Hurricane Floyd broke them up. And since then, the town has maintained them with a packed gravel instead of pavement because they're located within the setback area. At this site, the average annual erosion rate is 2 feet a year. And so that for linear projects like this, your rules dictate that linear projects use a 30 times setback. So 30 times 2 is a 60-foot setback measured from the vegetation line. There's no static line in this at the site. In June of last year, the town submitted its CAMA minor permit application to do the paving as proposed in the materials. On October 22nd of last year, DCM issued CAMA minor development permit, which is included in your materials. However, DCM conditioned out the subject streets, specifically omitting those portions of the project that didn't meet the 60-foot setback. And so that's why we're here today for the variance. The town asserts that the project will address persistent problems that they've had with maintaining the subject streets and the use of those streets by residents and town vehicles. The town also asserts that the general public will benefit from the project in that the project will provide easier access to the 2 beach accesses that are located in the area. As we saw, the town recently constructed a dune building project from approximately 200 feet west of High Point Street, east to the end of 3rd Street. This project authorized a 6.5-foot tall engineered dune with a 10-foot wide crest. The project also entails the planting of dune vegetation along the project area and the installation of sand fencing. At least when we were doing the facts a couple weeks ago, the project had been done, but not yet the sand fencing and vegetation, but those were happening soon and may have already started in the interim. So the town is seeking a variance from the commission's oceanfront setback rules found at 0306 in order to develop the subject streets with paving with asphalt as opposed to the gravel that's been used in the past. So on the 4 variance criteria, we agree on 1, 3, and 4, but not 2. So I'll run through these and spend a little time on 2. The first criteria, staff agree that paved roads are not an approved use within the setback per your rules, but your rules do allow driveways and parking areas with clay, packed sand, or gravel. And that's why they've been doing what they've been doing. The management objective for this ocean hazard areas in 0303 states that the purpose is to minimize losses to life and property resulting from storms and long-term erosion, to prevent encroachment of permanent structures on public beach areas, to preserve the natural ecological conditions of the barrier dune and beach systems, to reduce the public costs of development within ocean hazard areas, and to protect the common law and statutory public rights of access to use the land and waters of the coastal area. While petitioners characterize this as a move to protect the dunes in the area, staff note that the rules are also intended to minimize losses to property resulting from storms, and also, importantly, to prevent the encroachment of permanent structures on the public beach areas. On balance, the staff, in considering all of these purposes for this rule, staff believe that the strict application of the setback rules does cause the town an unnecessary hardship, and that granting the town a variance to pave these streets instead of gravel will be used to reduce the public costs of development within the ocean hazard area and make it easier for the town to maintain the subject streets. The second factor we disagree with, staff believes that it's the chronic erosion over the years, and specifically since Hurricane Floyd in 1999, that have caused the hardship in this case. The subject streets have been packed gravel during this time because the vegetation line retreated and has stayed retreated. While the town has been taking steps to address long-term erosion at the east end through the Terminal Groin and Fillet project, and now recently the Berman Vegetation Project, those are not peculiarities which cause the vegetation line to erode and position the subject streets within the setback. Instead, those are measures to try and move the vegetation line waterward in the future. While the vegetation line may move waterward in time, it's not there yet. And its current location is not a peculiarity in staff's opinion. On the third factor, staff acknowledged that the town has not done anything to accelerate the erosion near the subject streets and has actually taken affirmative steps to allow the vegetation line to move waterward through the Groin and Fillet project and the Berman Vegetation Project. And finally, we agree on the fourth factor. Staff acknowledged the efforts that the town has taken to through those other projects. However, at this time, based on the location of the subject streets as they relate to the vegetation line, staff agree that granting a variance would be within the spirit, purpose, intent of the ocean hazard rules and would protect public safety and welfare. However, continuing to allow future paving of the subject streets if they were to become waterward of the vegetation line on the dry sand beach is a reasonable condition that might be added to prevent encroachment on the public trust dry sand beach and to keep pavement further away from the stormwaters. So staff do suggest language for a condition to the variance that would be no paving, regardless of whether it's deemed repair or maintenance, shall occur waterward of the first line of stable natural vegetation. So in the future, if the vegetation line were to recede back, that would probably be a time to stop paving the road and think about going back to gravel in the future at that point. I'll invite Mr. Ure to come up and present petitioner's positions, and then we'll be happy to take any questions.
All right, thank you, Christy. Good afternoon, Mr. Ure.
Good afternoon. Just by way of introduction, thank you for hearing me today, Commissioners. My name's Jonathan Ure. I'm the town attorney for Ocean Isle Beach, North Carolina. And I'm happy to be here before you today. My town is the petitioner in this matter, and they're requesting a variance essentially so that they can pave a long-standing road in the town that unfortunately finds itself within the 60-foot setback from the first line of vegetation. In this case, it's a somewhat unusual situation because, again, this is a long-standing road. It used to be paved at one point in time about 25 years ago, and as I believe Christy pointed out in her statement of the facts, was washed out by Hurricane Floyd. And we have applied to CAMA to receive a permit to pave this road. The entire portion of the road, about 800 feet of East First Street, and then portions of Winston-Salem and High Point Street. Part of that was actually approved because it's not within that setback area. Unfortunately, there's a carve out of about 390 feet of East First Street and 15 feet of High Point Street. And that was the portion that, because it's subject to that 60-foot setback, was not approved. And that's why we submitted our variance request here today. I won't belabor the three criteria that we agree with the DCM on. I think Christy's statement of those issues was fairly succinct and accurate, that we believe here, for number one, that there is an unnecessary hardship caused by the strict application of the setback requirement, in that because this road has remained unpaved all this time, it's subject to weather events causing it to wash out, causing potholes, causing various mud and things like that on the road. The town has to come back in then and pay a contractor to repair it, to grade it, to fill those holes. And that creates a hardship on the town, extra cost to the town's residents and tax dollars, things of that nature. For number three, we certainly would say that this was not caused by the town. It's an act of nature. The town has taken affirmative steps in order to prevent erosion in the future through a terminal groin project and beach renourishment projects. And then as to number four, we would certainly suggest that this is in keeping with the spirit and purpose of and intent of the rules, in that we're essentially trying to promote public welfare, public safety by repaving this road, allow public access to the beach, and ultimately mitigate the cost of public development for the town. So the main one is the peculiarity of the property. And to that issue, I would say that one of the factors when considering the peculiarity of the property is location. And ultimately, the location of this specific portion of the road, it's located in such a way that it alone, out of that entire piece of road on East First Street, the entire piece of road on High Point Street, it falls within the setback. Now, the reason that this is an issue is because unlike a house or a piece of land, we can't move this road anywhere else. It has to be located here because there are 7 houses on this road in this setback that use this road for public access to a public road. And so, unfortunately, we have to keep this road here. Therefore, the setback and erosion there that only affects this piece of road is going to affect this portion unlike any other piece anywhere else. And so our position would be that that's what makes this a peculiar piece of property, that is the peculiarity of the condition that results in a hardship for this specific piece of road. As a result, we'd ask that the commission review our application and approve all 4 of the variance criteria and ultimately grant our variance. And I'm open to questions from the commission.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Eure or Christie at this time? Larry?
There was, in the record, it was regarding the town currently maintains this road now.
Yes, sir.
And DOT previously had it within their road system, but they pulled out, I think it was in 81. What was the reason they pulled out prior? Do you know?
I think, I can't recall I think the document in there stated that they did not believe it was worth maintaining this road, this specific, as a 2,800 foot portion of East First Street, that they wanted to move back to East Second Street, which is behind.
Mr. King?
I'm curious, you may not know the answer, but you mentioned there were 7 homes on this road. Do you happen to know whether the assessed value of those homes has gone up or down?
I'm not aware of that information. I'm sorry.
All right. No other questions? Neil?
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion that with regards to criteria 1, with strict application of the applicable development rules, standards, or orders issued by the commission cause the petitioner unnecessary hardships, we accept petitioner and staff's position of yes.
Second by Commissioner Holden. Any further discussion? All in favor? All opposed? It is unanimous. Next will be criteria 2.
Madam Chair, I'd also like to make a motion that for criteria 2, do such hardships result from conditions peculiar to the petitioner's property, such as the location, size, or topography of the property, we accept petitioner's position of yes.
Okay, is there a second to that?
I'll second that.
Second by Commissioner Baldwin. Any further discussion? Not all in favor? All opposed? 2 opposed. Next, criteria 3.
Madam Chair, for criteria 3, do the hardships result from actions taken by the petitioner? I move we accept petitioner and staff's position of no.
Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Holman. Any further discussion? All in favor? All opposed? That is unanimous. Lastly would be criteria 4.
And for criteria 4, will the variance requested by the petitioner be consistent with the spirit, purpose, and intent of the rules, standards, or orders issued by the commission, secure to public safety and welfare, and preserve substantial justice? I move we accept petitioner and staff's positions of yes. I do want to take up the staff suggested language for a condition to the variance that no paving, regardless of whether it is deemed repair or maintenance, shall occur waterward of the first line of stable and natural vegetation.
Second by Commissioner Holman. Discussion. Seeing none, all in favor? All opposed? The variance is granted, and Christie, that language that you requested has been put into it as a condition. Mary, if you'll pick that up, please, that was.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you all very much. Justin, good luck with the growing project. Seems to be working, and we'll look forward to periodic reports on how it's coming along. Thank you. Next up, Mary, I believe the floor is yours.
Great. Thanks a lot. So I don't want to repeat the memo that I provided for you on the history of the APA section 19.1B, but I did want to highlight a few things in that memo. First of all, as we integrate new commissioners into the work of the commission, oftentimes there are questions, and this request came out of a question raised by one of our commissioners, and we're always glad to take a minute and stop and look at what we're doing and why and explain that to the point that it's helpful for all of the commission. So I thought this was a really interesting deep dive into history, because rulemaking is something that this commission, as well as other environmental and other commissions, spend a lot of time doing, as you know. And how did we get to where we are today with the decennial review of rules, where we touch our rules at the legislature's request every 10 years. And as you know, we've completed one cycle that ended up with 30 rules that we couldn't get a agreement on with the Rules Review Commission, that ended up in court, where we are today with those. And we've now begun as a commission, or you've begun as a commission, the second decennial review, beginning with the 7B rules. And you'll be hearing more as we go forward from the planning staff at DCM as we move through that process. But before the legislature had put in place this decennial review, they kind of had some stutter steps on how we look at our rules. And that started with an executive order by Governor Perdue back in 2010, in which she told all her executive agencies to look at their rules and get rid of anything that they weren't using. And that had a really interesting process. The agencies had to do that with a focus on what rules aren't we using anymore, and drop them into a portal that was over at the Office of State Budget and Management. That portal, of course, doesn't exist anymore. And then the State Office of Budget and Management consolidated that, put together a report they gave the legislature, and it just sat there. The legislature didn't do any work with the rules themselves, and that continued for a while. Then what I think the legislature did, and this is my opinion, and I'm interpreting their action in 2014, is the legislature, in 2011, what the legislature did is they took that executive order language, and the legislature, not the governor now, told the agencies to conduct an annual review of its rules to identify rules that are unnecessary. So that's interesting, because that statutory provision in 2011 did not use the Office of State Budget and Management portal to consolidate unnecessary rules, and in fact didn't require a report out to anybody. It just said, agencies, look at your rules once a year to decide if there's anything that's unnecessary. It didn't put forward a process. It didn't say report out. It just kind of put it there. And then 2 years later, the APA was amended, and that's what led to the section I'm providing history on today, the APA 19.1B. So I thought that was interesting that's still in the rules. And then by the time the legislature put together the decennial review, which is every 10 years you look at it, it did not go back and take out this annual review provision. And from talking to folks who have just some anecdotal information, apparently this was considered at the time, but the cleanup didn't happen. And this sometimes happens with your statute. So the question is, it's still in the rule, the law. It's still part of the statute of the APA. And what are people, if anything, what are commissions, boards, agencies doing with this? So I sent out kind of an inquiry into my list of attorneys that represent boards and commissions, and just kind of asked that question, and found out that there's one agency, and I didn't even look at how many rules they have, that look at their rules every January, but I wasn't able to identify any other agencies that are still doing the annual internal review. Instead, everybody has transitioned to the decennial review, which we have here as well, this commission and DCM. So that's a little bit of the history of what happened, how 150B-19 came into being after the executive orders. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Jonathan, if you're ready, and he's going to give you kind of an update on where the DCM is in reviewing the rules. And we'll take questions after that.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you again, Madam Chair, members of the commission. I don't have too much to add to what Mary said. Just kind of a recap. Executive Order 70 in 2010 under Governor Perdue required the annual review. And then in 2011, this will be the abridged version of pretty much what Mary said. In 2011, APA was changed to require a yearly review. And then in 13, again, APA was changed by the legislature to require the decennial review. And then in 2014, Governor McCrory signed Executive Order 48, which actually removed the requirement of the annual review that was signed under Governor Perdue's executive order in 2010. So since that time, we did our first decennial review in 2014. We're coming up on the second now. The planning staff, as Mary had mentioned, is going through that now. The initial classification report will be August 28th, was August 28th, 2024. There's a 60-day comment period through September and November of 24. CRC approved the classification report in February of 25, and has been submitted to the RRC as of March 5th, 2025. I think Tancred had mentioned 7.0 that kind of was going through now, which will be done by the department. That's through the reserve. And we are coming up on our second decennial review, which will take place starting this year. We're expecting to receive the initial classification report from the RRC in August of 25. So August of this year. At that time, we'll do the necessary, unnecessary review of all the rules, all of your rules. And then that'll kind of start that process. Throughout the years doing this, we've touched our rules a lot. We do look at them as we use them every day. We look at them as we bring them to the commission, as you guys would like to change them. So we look at them, seems like yearly, but there is no formal process that we've undertaken that says, these rules are necessary, these are unnecessary, and put them before the commission. So that's kind of just a background and a summary of kind of what Mary said, with some additional information about the decennial review that we'll be going through this year. And with that, I'll open up for discussion.
Thank you. Questions? Jordan?
Yes. So I'm the one who brought it up to the chair and Ms. Lucas about this, what is an annual review. It was after reading the opinion from the Rules Review Commission that found that our practice on maintaining a mailing list wasn't in compliance, as we weren't doing that. And we had a reason why our Jockey's Ridge and other rules did not go into effect was because we failed to keep a mailing list of persons who have requested to be noticed for rulemaking, which I think is wrong and should have been addressed a while back. In that opinion from the Rules Review Commission, I found where it also requires an annual review of our rules. And I asked for that and still haven't yet to get that. And I guess that's not done. Is that right?
We do not have a formal process for an annual review of the rules to determine what's necessary and unnecessary.
Right. So So that's another section of the law that we're not complying with.
I would take that question if I could, Madam Chair. Okay. I don't think that this statute sets out a process by which that needs to be done. As you can see from my memo informally, and as Jonathan mentioned, I think there is a touch on the rules and they bring them before the commission. And this piece of the APA has been overtaken by the decennial review, which actually sets forth a very elaborate process. So it would be my position that we are in compliance with the rule and that we are looking at our rules all the time.
Follow up. So in your memo, you state in here the annual review requirement in the APA is internal within the agency. What's our internal within the agency?
So the agency is the commission because they are the commission's rules, and the commission works through its staff, who it delegates information to bring rules before it, to work with the rules, and to do the rulemaking recommendations that come before that agency to comply. So there are actually two agencies at issue here, and this Coastal Resources Commission, which meets 5 times a year, works through its staff. If the commission as a whole wants to give a direction to its staff to use a process to do something with its rules annually, the commission as a whole can make that recommendation. And that would be something different, but that process isn't required or defined in this portion of the APA, which appears to have been overtaken by the very straightforward, elaborate process that the legislature actually laid out for us that we follow with the decennial review.
Lauren?
So it's my understanding that when the executive order from McCrory was issued, I was at Marine Fisheries at the time, there were a lot of agencies that didn't touch their rules a whole lot. They had been on the books for years and years and years, and they had never been looked at. Whereas CRC and Lake Marine Fisheries, they're in their rules all the time. So I'm not really concerned that there's a lot of unnecessary rules sitting on the books for CRC at this point. However, I think at Marine Fisheries, the way that they decided to undertake it was they would take one chunk of the rules every year, submit that for review to comply with the 10-year requirement. And then the next year, they would take another chunk of rules. And so they would have basically rolling pieces of their code going through the 10-year review. So they weren't having to do all of their rules all at once. So if you wanted to do something like that, where you could maybe try to.
That is what we're doing. We're doing this, we're doing the 10-year review. They take it a section at a time because there's no way to undertake all the rules at one time. So like we're undertaking the planning rules now.
So, I mean.
And they'll go to another section after
That
that.
pretty much gets you consistently looking at them.
Can I get that schedule of the review of our rules?
It has not been released yet. We're waiting for that schedule from RRC.
Follow up.
The schedule doesn't come from internal. The schedule comes from the Rules Review Commission.
Okay, so, but you're saying that we review a chunk of our rules every year,
Based on the RRC's.
but you
schedule.
don't have the schedule of what rules?
That's correct, sir. They've given us the 7B, but they haven't given us the schedule for the rest of the commission's rules.
That's why 7B is which are planning rules, which is what staff is doing now. Any other questions? No? Thank you, Jonathan. Mary, do you have anything else on this one?
Nothing else. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you all very much. Next, we Cameron, Area of Environmental Concern, Ocean Hazard Notice Form.
Afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the commission. My name's Cameron Luck, and today I'll present staff's recommended updates to the AC hazard notice form, which I'll need to pull up here before I get going. A little bit more of a housekeeping side of things. Should be pretty straightforward. I thought my vision was good. Okay, like I said, I'll be presenting staff's recommended updates, the AEC hazard notice form, including a comparison of the current version, the revised draft for your consideration and approval. At your last meeting, staff were asked to provide a review of the rule language of 0306 that was either outdated or no longer being used. As part of that presentation, staff made note that as part of 0306E, which requires written acknowledgement from the property owner, the form currently fulfilling that role needed significant revision and update, and this seemed like a good opportunity for us to do that. As I just mentioned, the rule requires an acknowledgement to be provided in writing from an applicant, specifically the property owner. The rule does not actually require a form or any paperwork to be provided by DCM to the property owner as part of the application. It only requires an acknowledgement, written acknowledgement. As part of this revision, staff considered whether or not a form is even appropriate and determined a few things. Number one, that there's a lot of benefits to offering a form, as you can see here. And I'll run through them just very briefly. They're convenient, readily available both for staff and property owners, and they create a simple education forward mechanism for communicating the why and how of rules related to the work a property owner is proposing. Forms also help standardize information to potentially limit the amount of misinformation that they may come across. Forms, especially in this case, can also be adaptable as well, either operating as an official document or as an informal education piece or educational piece. In the case of the current hazard AEC notice form, it has been widely accepted by LPOs, staff, and the public for more than a decade. So given the determination to keep the form, staff have proposed significant revisions to better serve property owners planning to build in the ocean hazard areas. And I know this is difficult to see. We attached, as part of this memo, the old notice and the new notice, the new draft notice. So hopefully you have that, since this might be quite difficult to see. Let's take a look at the first current form, what it looks like. Right off the bat, a large portion of the form mirrors your ocean hazard area rules, and as a result is quite technical and pretty dense. But more importantly, some of that rule language has also changed since the form was made. For example, the form still states imminently threatened structures must be relocated or dismantled within 2 years. That rule language was updated to 8 years to align with temporary sandbag rules. It was never updated on the form. And there are a few other examples, including permit expiration, timeline errors, and inconsistencies regarding substantial development. The form's relatively dense, like I mentioned, for someone not well versed in your rules or property risks associated with this area, and could lead to confusion or simple disregard of reading the form and just going straight to a signature. That all said, there's quite a lot of useful information on that form that could be repurposed, and staff have attempted to do so with an updated version. So, as part of redoing this form, staff have attempted to maintain a similar look and feel to the original form, which may be beneficial since consultants are already familiar with the current forms. However, since these must be signed by the property owner, we place the educational information on the first page and property-specific information on the back, including the required signature. We also remove most of the rule-specific language, and on that form specifically point the property owner or applicant to their local permitting officer for guidance on current rule. This should increase the relevance and longevity of the information within the form. The remaining information is educational, gives property owners context for their conversations with their consultants and permitting staff. Staff did decide to continue providing property-specific information such as erosion rates, since that information guides their setback placement. Again, the main takeaways here is that the proposed updates to the form shift information towards the how and why CRC regulates development in the ocean hazard area, while still fulfilling the current written acknowledgement requirements of the rule. So I leave you 3 questions. Does the CRC agree that staff should continue using the form to fulfill the requirements? Does the CRC agree with shifting the focus of the form to be more educational? And does the CRC have any comments or feedback to the draft notice as it stands right now. And that's all I have for this.
Thank you, Cam. Jordan?
But I didn't see the old form. Is that in our packet? Which one is that? I see the new form and that's attached to your memo.
It should have gone as part of mail out. I have it pulled out, which is difficult to see, but it should have been attached as part of your mail out.
It says ocean hazard AEC notice. That's the existing form.
It's on the website or?
It's the last several pages of document 25-17 that was in our packet.
And I may have a copy if you'd like me to drop it off.
It's the last few pages.
Is it this? Okay. Just one point. When we change or assuming that the rules get changed on the 1979 plat of 2,000 square foot, we're going up to 2,500 square foot, assuming that that will be updated to when that is effective.
Yes.
Is there a question?
Good.
Any other questions? Cam had 3 questions.
I did have 3
Does
questions.
the commission answer yes to those questions? Are we agreeable to letting them move forward and along with those lines?
We're looking to formalize this draft as to replace the existing one.
I'm not seeing any negativity about moving forward to finalize the draft that you presented that make it more user-friendly as well as more informative. Is that correct, commissioners?
Yes.
Correct.
I haven't
Correct.
seen that. Okay.
And I
Thank you.
do have one question. There's some places where, there's a blank where it says CAMA local permit officer. Is that to be filled out by the closing attorney or is that filled out by?
It provides a point of contact. That's it. So
Okay.
it gives the property owner the individual to talk to as part of their permitting process. So that's either filled out by the LPO themselves or can be filled out by field staff.
Okay, so the LPO would be the one to fill in what their contact information is.
Which
et
is
cetera.
how it's currently being done.
All right, thank you.
Just a comment. I think it is an improvement.
Much better.
Great.
It's time for change. This
Yep.
is a case of updating.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cam. You got the direction you needed? Next up, Ken. Where's Ken today? Consideration of approval of fiscal analysis 15A NCAC 07H.0309, new standards for ocean hazard area exceptions. Whoops, I did skip there. Excuse me. Sorry, Ken.
You go.
And actually, I'm deferring to Christie. She's going to take the lead
My
here.
apologies. I skipped the line.
No worries. So I'm going to present, Mary did the memo for you all dated April 16th related to providing potential buyers with information on ocean hazard information. I've been working on this issue with a project for Sea Grant, writing an article about it. So I'm just going to go ahead and present it. So after Cam brought this issue to you at the last meeting in February, you all on Commissioner Smith's motion made a motion to provide potential buyers for owners to provide potential buyers of coastal real estate information about coastal hazards, and also to ask the Real Estate Commission to add coastal hazards to their disclosure form. This is separate than CAM's form. So the background here, Mary provided you with in the memo, this issue about could you require deed restrictions or a bond for removing houses on the beach, or condition a permit in such a way that it applies not only to the permittee but to potential future owners. This issue was looked at in the 1980s by the commission. The commission concluded in 1981 that the CRC doesn't have the authority to require things like deed restrictions or a bond. Fast forward to recently, in 2022, the Southern Environmental Law Center, on behalf of a number of clients, did a petition for rulemaking to the North Carolina Real Estate Commission related to amending their rules so that flooding information and flooding history of a property was added to the residential real estate disclosure form that is managed by the Real Estate Commission. At that time, the CRC sent a letter in support of including that flooding information, so in support of the petition for rulemaking, and also suggested that perhaps coastal hazards should be included as well as the flooding information. A copy of that letter is in your materials. At that time, the letter was received by the Real Estate Commission from your council. They discussed it. I watched the meeting. They did discuss it. It seemed like the main concern that was expressed by members of the Real Estate Commission was that flooding applies to all 100 counties. They were concerned about having some requirements that don't apply to everyone, that would only apply to 20 coastal counties. That was their justification for not going further with coastal hazards information and just sticking with flooding. They did change the rules. The disclosure now does have required disclosures by the seller about flooding. So at this point, we would agree that still this commission lacks authority to require deed restrictions or a bond for owners. We also believe that probably the Real Estate Commission is still not likely interested in adding coastal hazards to the disclosure form. Mary and I talked about potential opportunities to move this forward some degree, and included in your materials a copy of, and I don't know if Spencer is still here. This is a Spencer Rogers special. It is the questions and answers on purchasing coastal real estate in North Carolina. It's a brochure that was done collaboratively between Sea Grant and Spencer and the Real Estate Commission. It's not required to be given to potential buyers, but it is, some information that you can have. It's available on Sea Grant's website and on the Real Estate Commission's website. And I understand that, realtors will put it in a little brochure holder in their office. So it's there. It hasn't been updated since I think 2013 or 2011. So it's been a while. Oh, 18? Okay. And so one potential path forward on this issue might be to see if Sea Grant and the Real Estate Commission can work to update this brochure. I'm sure DCM staff would be happy to help and participate in that effort. And perhaps also to make the brochure more visible, more easy to find on the Real Estate Commission's website or Sea Grant's website or in other places, so that this background information on buying coastal property can be more readily available to potential purchasers. And so that's the end of my presentation, and we're happy to take any direction from the commission on this issue.
Thank you. Questions, comments? Staff, let's see, the staff had four recommendations, fourth being other options, but one of which was having DCM staff provide training for realtors as part of continuing ed credits, which is usually an encouragement to get people to take the course. Other comments? Seeing none, does the commission wish to, I'm sorry.
You said there was 4 recommendations?
Yes.
Okay.
In the memo. The fourth one actually says other options, but the third one was considered having DCM staff.
Can you read them out?
Yes, they're in the packet. The first one was contact the North Carolina Sea Grant Program, North Carolina Real Estate Commission, see if they're willing and able to update their brochure. Second was contact the North Carolina Real Estate Commission to see if the link to the brochure could be made more visible on their website. Third was consider having DCM staff provide a training for realtors, including an option to get continuing ed credit on the issues addressed in the brochure.
Make a motion that we do all 3.
Robert? One sec. Hang on just a minute. Would you withdraw your motion long enough?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Item number 3,
Mhm.
would you read that one more time, please?
Consider having DCM staff provide a training for realtors, including an option to get continuing education credit on the issues addressed in the brochure.
So, in the real estate business, not everybody's a realtor. So you are a licensed real estate agent. And so the Real Estate Commission probably have a much broader sense with that brochure than just limiting to the realtor.
Thank you. Noted. Sheila?
So continuing the discussion,
about the education. I guess I would first ask if that has been tried before and how it was received.
We actually do have a module for realtors that we offer, I think, at least annually. They get the CE credits for doing that, and it's been well received. So we can add this information into that module.
Jordan?
It's not a requirement for realtors, it's an option, right?
It's part of it's an option for the CE credits, correct?
Correct, to receive credits.
Correct.
Continuing education is always a requirement for realtors. It's interesting to think that we might could impose a rule on the real estate commission.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's not,
No, they already have that requirement.
okay.
No, we're
Well,
not,
they
we're
have
not,
the
we're not.
requirement for continuing education. I guess this from here would just allow this to be a part of their continuing education, to be an option
It's not a
for
rule.
credit.
We're not trying to impose any rules. We're just offering suggestions. We are.
So right now, if you have a real estate license, you have to get 8 hours of continuing education per year. 4 hours is an update, and the other 4 hours is an elective. And so I actually took the elective offered by the staff here maybe a year ago. And it was a great course, and probably 5 or 6 people I know took it and really enjoyed it. It was very informative.
Thank you,
Hear
dear.
that?
That's a good thing. We'd like to think that we're moving positively. All right. Any other questions? If not, is everybody agreeable to, okay, Jordan?
make a formal motion that we accept all three.
Okay. Seconded by Commissioner King. Any further discussion? All in favor? All opposed? It is unanimous. Thank you, Christie, and thank you, Mary. I'm sorry, Ken, now we'll move back to you.
Now we're back.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the commission. My name is Ken Richardson, and today I'm just going to summarize the fiscal analysis associated with rule amendments that you approved at your last meeting to 07H 0309B. So in your rules, 07H 0309 lists specific types of development that are allowed inside your setback rules established in 07H 0306. As you may recall, 07H 0309B specifically defines conditions in your rules that allow for a smaller structure to be constructed if it cannot meet the current setback, but can meet the minimum setback of 60 feet, along with some other conditions. So before the repeal of Rule 07H 0104, that rule applied to lots platted after June 1 of 1979. So 0309B applied to lots platted before June 1 of 1979. So before your setback rules were in effect. So these rules were commonly referred to as small structure exceptions. Again, the big difference between those two when they were on the books together was one applied to lots, the plat date of lots, but the structure size apply to both sets of rules. And a lot of times this did cause confusion, and so staff did question how consistent they were being applied. And so with beach management plan rules, 0104 was eventually repealed. These rule amendments include approval of the June 1, 1979 date. So the small structure exception in 0309 would apply to everyone, not just when your lot was platted. The removal of the 1,000 square foot footprint. So at the last meeting, it was recommended by the commission to increase the limit on the size of the structure to 2,500 square foot versus 2,000 square foot. So to continue through the rulemaking process, fiscal analysis was completed by staff. And looking at 2024 vegetation and going through and doing an inventory of vacant lots, as best we could tell from the data that we have, currently there are 354 vacant lots along the oceanfront. Based on our analysis, it looked like 144 of those could not meet its current setback. And that means that the setback requirement is greater than the minimum of 60 feet. So we're talking about, 3 times 30 or even higher. So of 144, it was estimated that about 29 potentially could meet the minimum setback of 60 feet, but likely could not meet their current setback just because it was greater than 60 feet. So based solely on a one-day market search and looking at oceanfront homes that were 2,500 square foot or less and looking at vacant lots, home sales for that category range from just under 500,000 to 6.1 million, or 6.3 million. So a large array of prices out there. The average was about 1.5. Looking at vacant lots, the prices range from about 50,000 to just under 5 million. And the average was about 1 million just for a vacant lot. So based on the search, the addition of a structure adds about, and again, just looking at that one day, just under 500,000 to 625,000 to the sales price of a lot on the oceanfront. Where these lots are located, the average property tax rate was about 50 cents on the $100 tax value of the structure, or the lot and the structure. So if a structure were to be built on all 29 of those lots, the tax revenue generated from that would be about just about 70,000 per year. So not significant. And looking at it just strictly from a property tax revenue. So just to summarize the impact, while property owners' intentions cannot be predicted or quantified, it can be anticipated that there would likely be a benefit to the property owner. So if they're not able to build, but because of this rule amendment, they could have built, we can anticipate that that would be a benefit to that property owner. While not substantial, local government could see additional tax revenues. That would be a benefit on their end. Again, while not substantial, permitting fees associated with the development of those 29 lots, there could be about a 2,900 permit fee increase, one time only. And so these rules do not have an impact on federal government projects or NCDOT projects as well. So the fiscal analysis was approved by DEQ on April 2nd and OSBM, Office of State Budget Management, on April 5th. And so unless the commission has any questions, the staff is asking the commission to consider approval of the physical analysis. And so if approved, the next step would be the physical, and the rule amendments would go to public hearing and then later come back to you to look at the public comments that come along with this. So this is just a continuation in the rulemaking process. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to.
Thank you, Ken. Does anyone have any questions for Ken, Jordan?
Yes. Thank you. You do a really good job. I've read through several of your reports, and it's very thorough and very well put together. Question on this. It was based on a 1993 study of house moving in North Carolina that said that a single story up to 2,500 square foot. Was there any part of that study? Well, one, is there any study more recent than 1993?
Unfortunately, we do not have that. So this was actually another Spencer Rogers study that was done in 1993 that looked at just the movability. And so at that time, the main considerations was looking at, infrastructure, utility lines, and that kind of thing, and looking at the street dimensions and how much you can move on a street at that time. So that's the most current for North Carolina that we have.
Are you aware of anything in that study about a multi-story, 2,500 square foot house and moving?
Well, and that was actually a part of it. I think maybe the issue. So I'd heard some comments about, if you raise the overall size, then you potentially could be looking at 3 stories versus 2, and then that might add some additional restrictions on the movability. But I don't have any data to really support that two-story structure versus a 3-story.
Correct. So under this current draft rule, if someone wants to build a 3-story house under 2,500 square foot, they could do that.
Correct.
Okay.
So we're not limiting stories. We're just overall structure size, or we're not limiting footprint.
Footprint.
It's approved right now. That's correct. Just the size.
Larry?
I don't have much problem with the physical analysis, but the topic that Commissioner Hennessy brought up is, and it's the way we use the term 2,500 square feet. We really need to be clear on that, what we're talking about, because, you know, the old rule talked about a footprint of 1,000 square feet. And that's a footprint I think people can understand. But when you say 2,500 square feet, I mean, we're talking about 2,500 square foot footprint, 2,500 square foot livable area, excluding attics and all that stuff. And I just hope we make that clear in our rule, what the 2,500 square feet we're referring to on this. And it sounded like the studies, it wasn't clear on that exactly what we were talking about, multi-story, single story, that type of thing. But moving forward, I hope we make that very clear. The 2,500 square feet is that livable area. And I think that needs to be very bright when we make a rule.
And that is
Or
buried in the
definition.
setback rules themselves, so not necessarily so
Yeah.
much in the exception, but.
Yeah.
It says total floor area.
The floor area.
Mhm.
But is that heated, unheated? I mean,
That's the total floor area. I mean, that would include all of that.
enclosed, not enclosed, decks, you know, you go on and on and on.
Right, it's defined in the rules. We just don't carry the same language into other rule sections just because we already have that defined.
Well, these exceptions are kind of a special situation. And, you know, it's not like building a new home. It's that meets all the requirements, but it's the 2,500 square feet, what's allowable, what's not allowable.
So it does say roof covered decks and porches that are structurally attached shall be included in the calculation of the footprint.
So would it make it clearer to say 2,500 square foot footprint? No.
Spencer, you've been quoted a lot during this conversation.
If I may.
Would you like to?
This rule was written shortly after the original setbacks were implemented along the coast, and it was done primarily to help keep the state out of court, and would allow, at least on the worst lots in the states, some limited level of development. And the numbers that were selected were carefully crafted at the time, and the reason for them is not necessarily obvious. This is unusual in that it requires the structure to be located as far landward on the property as feasible. And because of that, the 1,000 square foot footprint, which I think is about the only place that's used in the rules, was implemented because always a mystery to me, property owners want to build as close to the ocean as they can, no matter what. And if you're given a square footage limit, you can either have 1,000 square foot as far back on the lot or twice as much seaward of a 2,000 single story lot. So it was envisioned the 1,000 square foot footprint was to maximize the setback to get it as far away from the hazard as possible. Now, any lot that complies with this or needs to use it has an erosion rate of at least 2.5 feet per year. And in Rodanthe, it's 15 feet per year. So that's the primary reason the footprint was in there. And I think it's still functional for that purpose. The increase of the extra 500 square feet, if you keep the maximum feasible distance landward, the 1,000 footprint, the only way you can get that is go to a third story. And if you look at single story houses, they can often get under drop lines to individual houses to move it along the streets. 2 stories, sometimes it works, particularly if things are underground. But as soon as you get into that third story, you're approaching the distribution line impacts, and the power companies will not cut distribution lines to move houses. So they have to be elevated in place. And that can cost tens of thousands of dollars. During the relocation study, there were quotes of $50,000 to elevate temporarily distribution lines. So the point was to have no bigger than a two-story building with 2,000 square feet and minimize its distance seaward by using the footprint requirement of 1,000 square feet. And the date that's in there was important as well, because there are many places on the coast that have deep lots, and there would be no restriction on subdividing a deep lot and putting two houses on it, one of which would have to have the exception applied to it. So the point was, if an existing lot, it's already subdivided, if you can't meet the setback, then you can use this, but if you can meet the setback, then you should be complying with it on the deeper lot. So those three criteria were important and chosen not at random, but for specific purposes. And with that, I'll let it go, unless there are any questions.
Questions for Spencer? Jordan?
Just for clarity, so are we saying it's still limited to 1,000? It's up to a 2,500 footprint. So it can be a one-story, 2,500 square foot house footprint. Okay. No, I hear you're saying no?
Isn't it total floor
Floor
area?
area.
As
So it
I'm
could be
reading
one
the
story.
rule, it's not the footprint. Can you please correct me if I'm wrong?
Right, so the 2,500 is just strictly, that's the size of the structure. You can make it 4 stories or you can make it 1 story, as long as it's no greater than 2,500 square feet. So that's how the rule is proposed
I
at this
hear,
point.
but I'm just reading here and it says, but 07H.0309 limits the structure's footprint to 1,000 square foot.
Right, currently as written, it's.
Currently, right. We're changing it to 2,500.
Just, we're taking out the 1,000 square foot footprint and just.
Right. That's what I
2,500 square feet.
just want to make
1 story
clarity. Right.
or 3.
Right.
And so, just to point out, the 07H0104, it did not have the 1,000 square foot footprint limitation. So this, again, this was kind of a morphing of those two rules, even though 0104 was repealed. And so that's why that 1,000 square foot footprint just dropped out.
And we're taking away the 1979 deed requirement.
That's right. So this would apply to anyone on the oceanfront, regardless of when your lot was platted. And regardless of what your erosion rate is, it would truly be just, as long as you can meet that minimum setback of 60 feet and no more oceanward than your most landward adjacent neighbor. And so there's other conditions in there, but the two
Correct.
primary is you get that 60-foot setback requirement,
In
and
the deed.
it's 2,500 square feet.
Lauren?
It would be my preference to leave the rule just like it is, but I can read the room and see that that's not the will of the commission. So my question is, are they really, are houses really being moved? I mean, they're falling in the ocean. Do we see these houses really being moved much?
Well, so when we were at Ocean Isle, I believe there was a house, Spencer, right? There were 3 houses actually being moved. So it does happen. It doesn't get the spotlight that ones falling in the ocean get, but they still do get moved. So smaller is easier. But
Actually, there were a number of houses in Renanthe along one street that have all been picked up and moved, and in other places they are moving them. So there are places where that is occurring.
Maybe the rule still has a place in the world.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I make a motion to approve the fiscal analysis for the amendments to 15A NC AC 07H 0309 so that the rulemaking process can continue to proceed.
I second.
So that will send it to public hearing. Okay, thank you. All in favor? All opposed? 1 nay. Thank you.
Who was the
Lauren.
You know who it was.
Yeah, you're good.
Voted against it.
And the commission can amend these even further. So this is not the end of it. So if there's something comes up.
Comment, it will come back to us with a lot of comments. Okay. Pam? Consideration of approval of fiscal analysis 15A NCAC 07H.0209 urban waterfront.
Let's see if I can find it. This one's a little bit more straightforward than Ken's. So again, good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the commission. Again, my name's Cameron Luck. I'm here to present staff's fiscal analysis for the proposed rule amendments to your general use standards for the urban waterfront. Just catch everyone up since the November CRC meeting. Here's a quick timeline of how we got to this point. A variance was granted at the August 2024 meeting for a restaurant that had received an NOV for the installation of removable plexiglass panels that had been installed on the covered deck. Following that issuance, the commission requested staff propose rule language that would allow removable enclosures to be installed on structures within the urban waterfront. At your November 2024 meeting, CRC approved the proposed rule language, which brought staff to conduct the fiscal analysis. See here is more of a technical change due to that number 3, which changed the numbers of everything else. And then the final amendment a cross-reference for significant adverse impacts with the newly updated rules, which were 15A NCAC 07H 0208 A7 and A8. We'll jump into the impact of amendments or of these rule amendments. So as you're familiar, the fiscal analysis reviews how these rule changes would financially impact all parties typically involved in permits, including DOT, local governments, private property owners, and DCM. After consideration of these rule changes, there's believed to be no impact to NCDOT or local governments, although staff believe this rule change will provide local governments with clarity in the staff's position should they choose to implement standards that meet or exceed state regs. When considering the impact to private property owners, staff believe the impact is positive. Allowing these structures will allow increased seasonal usability of outdoor spaces, which should increase revenue capacity. This also reduces likelihood of needing to go through the variance process in order to secure a structure like we just saw. Finally, this rule change is not anticipated to have a significant impact on DCM. There is a potential for existing businesses to submit permit requests to retrofit existing structures, but in general, staff expect most removable enclosures to become a line item in project proposals moving forwards. Next step, so the fiscal analysis has been approved by OSBM. That was done April 15th. And at this point, we're asking for the CRC approval of the fiscal for these amendments to move on to public comment.
Okay, thank you, Cam. Any questions for Cam? Jordan?
In your memo, you say the fee range is from $100 to $400 per application. What's triggers the range?
So I might lean on Jonathan a little bit. Hal, he may not still be here. So we were looking into minor permit fees. Is he? Where's he at? Oh, perfect. I lean on him a lot. So minor permit fees to major permit fees.
So we anticipate that this rule could trigger a minor permit and a major permit?
No, what it gave you was a range of a minor permit to a major permit.
So types of permits.
Permits. That you don't have to have both types. You can make them apply for a minor, or if the business was doing, or whomever was doing a big project, it might require a major permit.
It has a lot to do with whether or not the structure exists, or if they decide to build the deck and cover it, and then also include a removable enclosure as well. Yeah.
Understood.
Did you have a question? Any further questions? If not, a motion will be needed to approve fiscal analysis for 7H.0209 for public hearing. Motion by Lauren, is there a second? Seconded by DR. Any further discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Motion is unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, Cam. Heather? Next is consideration of adoption 15A NCAC 07H.0314, installation of and maintenance of wheat straw bales for sand fencing. DR?
do we need to check with RRC or anybody in order to have a requirement for recess every 2 hours?
We'll have a 10-minute break.
there's several people. Switch them out. And if it does reemerge, we're gonna try to reclaim the courts.
I wonder if he noticed I switched seats with him.
Oh, I know, you got the uncomfortable one.
That wouldn't be
I'll be fine with that too. You give me a wood seat, that's what I get.
I wonder what kind of price tag they got on there.
This meeting will now come back to order.
I get the most comfortable.
Heather, we're going to give you the floor, talking about hay bales again, or straw bales.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the commission. For the record, my name is Heather Coates. I'm the division's Beach and Inlet Management Project Coordinator in the Wilmington office, and I am here to present the public comments regarding the proposed rules for the use of wheat straw bales as sand fencing. So as a brief recap of the proposed rules and consideration of the unknowns regarding how these perform and degrade, the rules were drafted to limit their use to just government entities and a local HOA with more than 1 mile of oceanfront shoreline to keep the use of straw bales somewhat limited in scope until we have a better understanding of their impacts and efficacy. Similar language to sand fencing rules saying that straw bales cannot impede public or emergency vehicle access or be installed in a manner that endangers sea turtles and requires consultation with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and Wildlife Resources Commission through permit application review. To help make that determination is seen here in Part C. And then Part D requires the removal of any ties or bindings to reduce debris and the risk of entanglement. Part E requires that straw bales be limited to the same length, maximum length as sand fencing, so maximum of 10-foot sections. And it would allow them to be up to 2 feet in width and 3 feet in height. They would be limited to being no more than 10-foot waterward of the first line of stable natural vegetation, the erosion scarp or the toe of the frontal dune, similar to sand fencing, and 7-foot spacing between sections of straw bales or sand fencing or Christmas trees or any combination thereof would be required. And finally, non-functioning, damaged, or wheat straw bales or stakes that have moved from their alignment are required to be repaired or removed. 2 public hearings were held, one at the end of October and then at your last February meeting with concurrent public comment periods. 7 written comments were received. 0 comments supported the proposed rules and all 7 objected. The objections we received were from North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission and Southern Environmental Law Center. You also heard from them during your last public hearing. NC Audubon, North Carolina Wildlife Federation, 2 members of the Ocean Isle Beach Sea Turtle Protection Organization, and 1 private citizen. All of those comments have been provided in your packet and with a brief summary of their concerns. And so those have been included for your consideration. I'm happy to answer.
Thank you, Heather. Jordan?
Yes. In reading your memo, I didn't see my comments that I made at the last commission meeting.
Yes, I did not. I don't believe those were included.
Yeah, they're not. So I'm just going to read what the meeting minutes state at our last meeting. Liz Rashid, Southern Environmental Law Center, spoke against the use of straw bales as sand fencing. Matthew Godfrey, NC Wildlife Resource Commission, spoke against the use of straw bales as sand fencing. Commissioner Hennessy stated he found it problematic to allow one class of people to install wheat straw bales, not allow another class, such as individual property owners. This could be unconstitutional. Additionally, there may be hesitation by local governments to use the bales as they cost higher. WRC has spoken out against this rule multiple times, and it could create a conflict if they are reviewing these permit applications. They could comment unfavorably without reviewing facts or location. I'd like to make a suggestion that when a commissioner makes a comment during a public comment period or during a period, that it would be included in the record on that. And my position states this is the same as you're creating a structure here that you're going to allow only local governments and HOAs to get a permit to put hay bales out there. But yet, if a private property owner wanted to come and do it, like they're able to do on sand fencing and other mechanisms, they can't do that. But they can do that with sand fencing. I believe the advisory commission addressed this too last year. Do you recall?
There was discussion of this, yes.
Do you remember what their concerns were?
I do not. I know there was discussion about this maybe, someone could.
Yeah. So if I could just, a couple of things. One is typically when we have discussions on rulemaking with the commission, we don't put those into the public hearing record. Otherwise, we'd have to capture everybody's discussion, put those into the public hearing records. It's not really a practice that we've ever adopted. If you all would like to see your full comments in the record public hearing versus in the minutes, we can certainly do that. And then as far as the CRAC discussion, yeah, we heard this discussion. So that's how we got to the draft rule language. Those comments were all taken into account in drafting the rule, which then went to public hearing twice. So if there's something else that you think we missed out of the CRAC discussion, we're happy to.
So last year when this particular rule came up, you gave a PowerPoint presentation after the advisory commission meeting, and you listed like 4 concerns that they had. I don't see any of that in the record here. One of them was also limiting it to local governments and HOAs and not allowing individual private property owners to be able to seek a permit. So I'll be voting against the rule because I don't believe it's constitutional.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? DR?
Mary, I was just wondering if Mary feels comfortable addressing the issue about whether it's constitutional. Seems like that you have to be a protected class to be in a situation like this. I don't know if the property owners are a protected class.
I've done the research on it, and so that makes sense to me. I don't see anything unconstitutional that's jumping out on me, and I don't actually understand your argument, Commissioner, as to why you think it's unconstitutional. But we do a lot of rulemaking that focuses on situational things, and we sometimes try things, as we did with the MATs, with local governments being able to do it first, and we have not drawn any challenges to that based on constitutionality or other things, and I don't see an issue in that. But I'm sure.
I mean, I just wanted to possibly allay that fear of being unconstitutional. To me, it's like if you got a 300-foot wide lot, there might be certain rules versus a 100-foot wide lot might be different rules. So it's not I don't think we have a constitutional concern.
Sure, I could understand that if you're setting it on a standard of that. This isn't setting it on any type of standard. It's just saying if you are a local government, you can go get a permit to do it. If you're not a local government, you can't get a permit to do it. Or an HOA that has a mile-long beach. So.
Does anyone have any questions as it pertains to the rule or the presentation by Heather? Not, a motion will be needed to adopt or not adopt 7H0314. And if it's approved by the CRC, it would then go to the RRC for review.
I make a motion to approve the proposed rule language in 07H0314.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by DR. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor? I'm sorry, Lauren, did you have a question?
Well, just a comment. I just would like to say, I think we're opening ourselves up to a lawsuit. I think Southern Environmental Law Center is going to definitely pursue it based on the comments that we received. So I just wanted to make sure we were thinking about that before we proceeded.
I agree. I would have to agree with that. We know who the Southern Law folks are. Yeah.
Actually,
Well, I'm trying to understand the proposal though. Is it to accept the hay bales as a possible fix, period? I get that we're allowing some people to do it, some not, but
it's allowed in lieu of sand fencing by the agencies that were listed in the rulemaking as an alternative to sand fencing. However, if I read the rules correctly, based on a certain amount of objections, it could possibly face objection with the Rules Review Commission anyway.
all of the comments responding, none like the hay bales. They don't seem to be effective. Did I miss something?
Chair.
The comments, the proposal came from some of the communities down south. I believe Bald Head Island, Ocean Isle Beach, and so forth. Some of the communities down south had proposed them, and that's how it came forward. Jordan?
Sorry. I was going to make a suggestion if Spencer or someone from Ocean Isle that has used these hail bales in the past might want to talk about it.
Well, we have the manager of Ocean Isle here, if he'd like to say anything. Since they're the ones that first proposed it other than Bald Head, because Bald Head's not Bald Head, excuse me, Figure 8. David's not here right now.
And I think it might have been
Justin.
Figure 8 that did it initially.
Yeah, Figure 8 did.
So when we proposed it, we were having trouble. That was, coming out of COVID, trouble acquiring sand fence with the metal and things coming out of Canada. There was a lot of issues that were going into the availability of sand fencing. So we had saw that Figure 8 had done a kind of a pilot project in the past, and we just kind of wanted to mimic it. And it was successful in some areas. Then we did have a storm, and some of it washed away. Others, it's still covered up, and as far as I'm aware, it's still there, just all covered with sand. From our aspect, it's similar to the Christmas trees, I guess, and the kind of the policies that go to placing them along the ocean front.
Bob?
I recall that one of the reasons we took this up in the first place was there was a shortage of sand fencing, and I believe that shortage
I hadn't heard
has
any-
remedied itself.
Oh, yes, sir. I hadn't heard.
Yeah. Not crazy about this rule either, but I'm okay with taking it the next step. I'm sure we're going to hear more from the conservation organizations about it. I'm just trusting it's worth the trip.
And
To-
excuse me, Robert?
To that concern of lack of availability, that is, would affect the homeowner or the commercial hotel or other people along the property, the oceanfront that have great amount of oceanfront. They would have the same problem as anybody else, and does it put them within not being able to protect their property because there's a limitation that they can't get a sand fence? Will that come up again? I mean, because it's been resolved today, is there a situation that could come back to us in the future and then ultimately hurt our coast because a great amount of property is owned by the private sector? I'm just again, looking at all this beach in particular. I mean, 99% of it is privately held, probably.
I think this will be a constantly evolving situation and keep coming back as things change or as it proves to be effective or not effective, and there will be a push to expand it. Neil?
It's my understanding that the limitations on who can use the wheat straw bales was an attempt to find middle ground between not allowing it at all and allowing 100% of the beach to be covered with it. And that's where when we created this rulemaking, however long ago it was when we started this process, That's my recollection of why we limited the people. So we're still trying to sort out, is this a viable method? And so let's start with some limitations on who can use it first before we say blanket approval for everybody.
Jordan?
Great point. Chair Coon, how long's Nags Head Beach?
Nags Head has 12 miles of oceanfront, something like that, from milepost 11 to milepost 21, 22.
Correct. So I view if we allow individual property owners to take care of their own property, that you probably would have less of these hay bales out on the beach, because since we're requiring local governments to do it, they're end up going to have to do it in several miles of the span to cover the hot spots, where if we allowed individual property owners to take care of their own individual property, they would do it in small spurts, and it wouldn't be as of a great significant scale as what a local government would do.
However, in Nags Head, the town of Nags Head manages the sand fence program.
Sure, and sand fencing is cheaper than hay bales, correct?
Possibly.
That's what it said in
depending on
our
where the
fiscal
tariffs
notice.
take care of it.
Well, that's life right now. So, but in the fiscal notice, the hay bales were costing more, so we're going to be putting more of a burden on our local governments to have to go pay for this rather than allowing it.
Yeah, right. I'd like to add, there's no requirement to use.
Of course it's not, but if a group of citizens go and petition their local government to do it, I mean, and then not everybody's an oceanfront property owner either, so.
Actually, in Nags Head, everybody has an easement. The town has an easement to do all the projects on the oceanfront. So that's why, and everybody pays an assessment, so it's pretty uniformly.
MSD, is that?
Yeah, it's an MSD. Yeah. Any other questions? If not, okay. Need a motion.
Motion and a second.
Motion and a second. If no further discussion, all in favor? Did you get that, Angela?
No, one more time.
All in favor?
Okay, got it?
All opposed? 5.
Okay. 4 opposed.
5. 5. I believe it's 7 to 5.
I have 7 yeas. I have Commissioner King as a nay, Sheila as a nay, Commissioner
Robert.
Hennessy, Commissioner Yates.
Robert. Robert.
I missed Robert. Okay, got him. Yes, 7 to 5.
Motion passes 7 to 5. Thank you. Thank you. And it will go to RRC, where comments will be taken, I'm sure, by everybody. Thank you. Daniel, man-made ditches.
Change the subject.
I need to put my glasses on.
There she goes. All right. Well, good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the commission. I want to change things up a little bit and kind of go into the estuarine system here and talk about man-made ditches. As you know, this has come up recently as a point of discussion. So here's just a picture to try to put us into what I'm getting ready to talk about. This is an open grounds farm, as y'all know. It's in Carteret County. It's a 45,000 acre farm. It has major tributaries that come inside the farm. And then, of course, there's man-made ditches being pulled off of these tributaries that are actually connected to ag farm field ditches and also big canal drainage ditches beside the road. So I'm going to go into the rules and laws that apply and try to explain to you how we approach these situations in the field. So as you all are aware, man-made ditches came up in jurisdictions become a topic of discussion due to a petition for rulemaking. That petition for rulemaking was withdrawn. However, the petitioner submitted a declaratory ruling on February 27th of this year, and Madam Chair notified the petitioner that he had denied it and notify the petitioner that he has the right to resubmit with the proper necessary information, or that he could appeal, and he had 30 days of the date of that denial to request an appeal, and I don't believe, Mary, that we have received an appeal. So I'd like to discuss this issue to provide clarity specifically regarding the laws that apply to man-made ditches. So to start with, going back to the petition for rulemaking, Estuarine Waters AEC, our Estuarine Waters Area of Environmental Concern, does not apply to man-made ditches. The reason why this is so is because in the general statute, our laws, where it defines estuarine waters in General Statute 113A-113B2, it does not include man-made ditches in its description. However, it does include bays, sounds, rivers, tributaries that are seaward of the dividing line between coastal fishing waters and inland fishing waters. So therefore, the Estuarine Waters AEC does not apply to a man-made ditch. However, there are other AECs that we have that could apply to a man-made ditch depending on its characteristics. So again, I would like to start with the laws that are applicable. This would be the General Statute 113-105A, which provides the definition of development. That would be taken into consideration of a man-made ditch. 113A-103.5B4 provides a criteria when activity exempt from the definition of development due to the agricultural and forestry exemptions. So I'll go into that in more detail about a man-made ditch that's considered in an agricultural or forestry practice. And then General Statute 113A-113B1 grants y'all's authority to create coastal wetlands as an AEC is defined as contiguous areas to protect those wetlands. So again, the Estuarine Waters AEC is defined in the general statute, as I mentioned. The definition does not specifically include man-made ditches. Our dredge and fill definition of estuarine waters is nearly identical to our CAMA definition, so that's lining up identically. And then we provided a definition of marshland, which includes areas where named species are present, where tidewaters reach in marshland areas through natural and artificial watercourses. And this definition is cross-referenced in the CAMA definition of coastal wetlands. So now to move on to our rules. Those were our laws. That gives us authority. It gives us a definition of what to work with. Now we're moving into the rules that the commission y'all had in the past have adopted. So the rules and the AECs that would apply to a man-made ditch would be the coastal wetlands, if coastal wetlands are present within that ditch, whether or not it's considered a public trust water, and if it's considered a public trust water, whether or not it's going to have the coastal shoreline AEC. So to start with the coastal wetland AEC, these are defined by a list of wetland species that are found in the field or will be found in the ditch, and whether or not this ditch is being regularly or irregularly or occasionally flooded. And then if that situation, if it is, there's field indicators that our field reps would use by looking in there to see if tidal water is present, any elevation changes, evidence of appropriate species such as periwinkle and crab burrows, vegetation staining, and rack lines. So the other AEC I mentioned is our public trust AEC. And the public trust AEC is bound by the high water mark or the normal water level in a natural and artificial waters. Staff conducts site visits to determine it will use a stamped survey, but there's 6 factors that must be met when they're looking at whether or not a body of water or a man-made ditch will be considered a public trust AEC. And those 6 factors are basically the use of the water by the public. Is the public using these waters? The history of the area, how long the public has been using this body of water, the value of this body of water, this biodiversity, its connectivity. How is it connected to the water system or the water body, the sounds, the bays, the rivers, as I explained before. And most importantly, and the one that I think is most important for this discussion, is navigability. Whether or not that water body, that man-made ditch can be navigable. And whether that navigable it is, can a boat, what size boat, what type of boat, we'll get into that, can actually be used within that body of water. We also have some use standards to go in line with the Public Trust AEC, and that is 7H0208, that basically allows standards for filling canals and bases and ditches. They shall be allowed if these following conditions are met. Basically, whether or not these excavated lands were below normal high water, whether they were created within wetlands, whether or not the filling of a man-made ditch would have any adverse impact to primary nursery area shellfish beds, or submerged aquatic vegetation, whether or not filling of a man-made ditch or canal would have any impacts to coastal wetlands, public trust rights, as we were just explaining, navigability, and the public trust usage, and whether or not that filling would have any adverse value to enjoyment of the riparian area by a property owner. So as I mentioned, navigability is the most important thing in my opinion when it comes to whether or not a ditch or water body is considered a public trust AEC. And the way we have been handling this in the past, and glad Christy is here with me, is that we've been using case law to go back to whether or not a ditch, a canal, or made body of water be considered a public trust AEC. These would be Gluffney versus the state of North Carolina, where the rights in the public waters subject to public trust doctrine were established. There was a case of Bauman versus Woodlake Partners, and this was a test for navigability as if it is navigable by watercraft. In this situation, it was a kayak. And then there's a Fish House versus Clark. There's a man-made canal connected to a natural water body, and would this be subject to the public trust doctrine? So if it's going to be considered a public trust AEC, and established within a man-made ditch, then the coastal shoreline AEC applies. So here's where the situation comes in. You have buffers, and you have our AEC, and you have our jurisdictional line. So in this situation, the function of the intersection of upland and aquatic elements, that's where the line can go. AEC is similar to both, required new development to be located 30 feet landward of high water, as we discussed at the CRAC, 30-foot buffer in discussion. And the AEC comes with specific use standards for the proposed development. So in conclusion, I'd like to add that it's not assumed that all man-made ditches are considered within DCM's jurisdiction. It definitely doesn't apply to estuarine waters AEC. The biggest thing we have to take into account is whether or not it's a public trust AEC. And if it is, then you have your 30-foot buffer or in a 75-foot AEC lines drawn off of that. Or if coastal wetlands are present, and went through that before. So coastal wetlands is an AEC. So if there are coastal wetlands present within a man-made ditch, those coastal wetlands, per our other rules, cannot be impacted, depending on the proposal. So it depends on what the development is for the proposal. I'm going to conclude with some pictures to try. This can be confusing. Tankard and myself and Jonathan, we spent a lot of time with the petition rulemaking, the declaratory ruling, to try to paint the picture for you of the laws that give you the authority, the rules that apply, and how we approach this in the field. And as you know, North Carolina's coast is completely different, north to south. You have big dikes, big ditches, small things, different tidal influences. And so here's a picture of a drawing that shows the estuarine waters going up to that red line. That's that coastal inland waters line. If it's considered navigable, you can see the black line is where we would claim no navigation. So that's where we would lose jurisdiction. Moving from that black line waterward, we would claim public trust water AEC, because in this situation, staff has determined that it is navigable. And then we put a little, Cameron do this drawing and put some pictures of coastal wetlands in there. And if we find coastal wetlands, then those coastal wetlands can't be filled. Here's a picture of just Google Earth. This is from Carter County. I grew up in Carter. I was just trying to find places that I knew would paint the picture of this discussion. As you can see on the right side of the road, we have a tributary creek. That's a natural water body. Coming in, is going into the road, and on the other side of the road, it's feeding into agricultural ditches. So in this situation, we would not claim jurisdiction on the left side of that road because of the agricultural exemption, and also because it's not navigable in that situation. This ditch is 2 to 3 feet wide. There's no way you could, it might be tidally influenced, but it's not navigable. And here's a picture of Open Grounds Farm. And the reason why I brought this one up is this is, as I mentioned in the first picture, here is a tributary. It pulls into the road. On either side of this road are big dikes where a boat can definitely navigate. I mean, people go up and down these dikes to fish, but they're man-made. So in this situation, we would claim jurisdiction in these dikes on either side of that road going left. But by that red dot, when that dike crosses underneath another road to start feeding and draining farm fields, we would not claim jurisdiction because that's, again, an agricultural exemption, whether or not it's navigable or not. So I'll stop there and open it up for discussion. And bear with me, it can be confusing at times. And as Tankard had mentioned to me earlier today, we might want to clean up our rules to make it more clarify or cleaner compared to the way we have.
Less confusing.
Less confusing. So yeah, I'll stop there and answer any questions.
We've got time for a few brief questions before we go to public hearing, then we would have to come back. Neil?
Navigable by kayak is considered navigable?
Correct. And that goes back to some case law.
Okay.
Bob?
Prior to the petition for rulemaking, is this something that comes up frequently, this jurisdiction? Or is that, I mean, I just don't recall having had to deal with this over the years.
I would think, Jonathan, no, we have not received. I mean, it probably comes up in a question like, hey, I've got a farm field. Looks like this ditch is tidal. Can I go in here and farm it? That's a verbal response back and
Right.
forth. Okay. And that probably does come up occasionally, but it's not become a problem. And I think most farmers are accepting the responses they've been getting from
So
us.
I mean, I just wondered how many hoops we should jump through when if this is a complaint from one person who didn't really follow through to the next step.
Neil?
There are examples in Oak Island where you have canals and then you have drainage ditches that are feeding into canals that are impacting private property in multiple locations in Oak Island. So that would be, to me, where we need to focus more time than talking about agricultural ditches.
Mr. King?
Yeah, I didn't hear a lot of specifics with regard to the difference between a man-made ditch and a man-made canal. But before you answer that question, can you put the last slide up with that road and the creek running? Yeah, right there. That's it. You said that was a man-made ditch?
On either side of the road, correct.
You must have been drunk. You don't, a man wouldn't make a ditch that crooked.
You don't see the ditches, do you?
You can't, they're on either side of the road running east, right to
Oh,
left.
okay. All right.
Jordan?
So do these man-made ditches connect to a navigable body of water?
And what's your definition of connection? Like freely? Is there
Well,
a culvert? Is there
So what I'm kind of referring to is the U.S. Supreme Court ruling on wetlands that was done, I guess, 2023, Sackett, yeah, versus EPA, which essentially said that, and correct me where I might be wrong here, but is a wetland is not considered a wetland or isolated wetland unless it touches a navigable body of water.
So the definition of coastal wetlands is different from the DWR definition and the core definition of 404 wetlands. So we're talking about two entirely different kinds of
So
wetlands.
we have a standard that's more stringent than a federal standard?
No, coastal wetlands are defined differently by statute. It's a different type of wetland than coastal wetlands are typically also 404 and core wetlands, but the reverse is not often the case.
So is there a federal standard?
There's the federal definitions through case law of what is included as wetland, waters of the U.S. and how that's defined for federal wetlands under the 404 program under federal law, which is different than the coastal wetlands definition through state law.
follow up. And I know Ms. Lucas and the chair can, I mean, there is a law, state law that says that we cannot have any standard that exceeds a federal rule or law. That limits it to like 9 state agencies, which includes environmental agencies.
Those are rules. We have a state law definition in both the CAMA and the dredge and fill that defines
Okay,
coastal
so the
wetlands.
legislature needs to change it and exclude it, is what you're saying? If that's,
That might be your opinion, but yes, it's a law, not a rule.
We're going to halt this discussion. We will come back to it. Daniel, you're going to have the floor because you're going to talk about the public hearing.
Right, so first question, do we have anyone signed up?
Yes. I do
Okay,
have some
okay,
people signed
so,
up. Yes.
I'll change up a little bit. So, attention to this hearing will please come to order. Good afternoon. I would like to welcome you to today's public hearing on the Coastal Resources Commission's proposed coastal development rules contained in 15A NCAC subchapter 7H 0508 in accordance with the Administrative Procedures Act. My name is Daniel Gavoni. I'm with the Division of Coastal Manager's Office, and I will serve as the hearing officer for this public hearing. If there are any local or state officials present, please raise your hand so I may recognize you.
I have 2 people signed up to speak. Former Mayor Muller from the Friends of Jockey's Ridge and Mayor Ben Cahoon from the town of Nags Head. And then
Thank you all for coming today. The public comment period ends on June 2nd of 2025. If you want to submit written comments or electronic comments in addition to or instead of any comments you make today, please submit them to the DCM Director Tankard Miller at the Division of Coastal Managers Morehead City Office at 400 Commerce Avenue, Morehead City, North Carolina 28557, or you can email them to Tankard Miller. I want to stress that written and oral comments are treated equally. Therefore, if you do not have time to say everything you want to today, please provide written or electronic comments by June 2nd. You may also leave written comments with any coastal manager staff that you see here today. Staff will prepare a summary of all the comments for the CRC's consideration at its upcoming meeting, and the public is welcome to attend that meeting as well. So the proposed rule redesignates Jockey's Ridge as an AEC with proposed use standards, which are nearly identical to the original 1984 standards. The proposed rule is written in 3 parts. The first is 15A NCAC 7H 0508, the description, which describes Jockey's Ridge and its importance. Secondly, 15A NCAC 7H 0508B, boundary, describes the AEC boundaries where the map of the AEC boundary can be found. And then 0508C, use standards, states that removing more than 10 cubic yards of sand per year shall require a CAMA permit. And all sand that was removed shall be deposited in a location within Jockey's Ridge. And any development within Jockey's Ridge AEC shall not alter the movement of sand except when necessary for maintaining a road, a residential or commercial structure, access way, lawn, garden, or parking areas unless authorized by Jockey's Ridge State Park Management Plan. I will now call on the persons who have indicated desire to comment on the proposed rules. Please limit your comments to matters relevant to the proposed rules. Each speaker is limited to 3 minutes. Again, if you have written comments, please turn them in to me. Again, please leave your comments with the hearing officer. It's solely to the proposed temporary rule amendments. In this situation, they're permanent rules. Please give your name and address before you begin your comments.
Former Mayor Muller, good afternoon.
Thank you. Chair Cahoon, members of the commission, members of the public, my name is Robert Muller. I serve as the treasurer of the Friends of Jockey's Ridge, and I am speaking on their behalf today. I rise to strongly endorse the readoption of the AEC for Jockey's Ridge State Park, the designation that was first adopted nearly 40 years ago and is established to preserve a most iconic and fragile landmarks, one of the most iconic and fragile landmarks in North Carolina. Jockey's Ridge is not just the tallest natural sand dune system on the East Coast. It is a dynamic geologic formation and vital ecosystem, a public treasure that holds ecological, recreational, educational, and emotional significance for generations of North Carolinians and visitors. We're here today not only because Jockey's Ridge is, because of what Jockey's Ridge is, because of what it has meant to the people of North Carolina, No better way to tell that story than to tell the story of Carolista Baum, who did what many would not do and stood up in front of a bulldozer to stop the destruction of Jockey's Ridge State Park. But that was not all she did. She formed the People to Preserve Jockey's Ridge. She stayed in Jim Hunt's office for months at a time. She persisted. She persisted. She was relentless. And after many years, she managed to get the National Natural Landmark designation and adoption of a state park for Jockey's Ridge. But Carolista's story is not just a tale of bold act. It is, in fact, a tale of persistence. And her persistence is mirrored here again by your persistence, continuing to adopt this important rule. From the time of the creation of the park in 1975, the establishment of the AEC in 84, and now decades later, we have been persistent in the state has been persistent in trying to protect Jockey's Ridge. Your work to push back against the unjustified removal of the AEC designation, despite the repeated insistence of the Rules Review Commission, is part of the same legacy. It has taken grit, it has taken patience, and it has taken the kind of commitment to good public policy that defines responsible government. Your rules are reasonable. Taking the limits, the kick-in of 10 cubic yards of sand is reasonable. Maintaining it in the park is important because it is a living dune and it moves. And the requirement of a permit for development within the AEC is also an enormously reasonable condition. There was nothing unreasonable about it. To remove the AEC status from Jockey's Ridge is to turn our back on science, on stewardship, and on the people who gave so much to preserve and restore, to preserve this place. To restore it is to honor their legacy and ensure that future generations will know that Jockey's Ridge is not just a cautionary tale, but a success story that happens when a community and its leadership refuse to give up. Let's finish what Carolista started. Thank you for your persistence in readopting the AEC, and I urge you to take that action again. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Ben? Good afternoon, Mayor.
Afternoon. Good afternoon. My name is Ben Cahoon. I'm the mayor of Nags Head, North Carolina. I reside in 2616 South Compass Lane in Nags Head, a little north of Jockey's Ridge. Following Bob Mueller in office is difficult. Following him as a speaker is daunting. But I'm happy to have the opportunity to speak with you today. I have spoken and written to you previously about the value of Jockey's Ridge to our community, about its obvious environmental value, and about the absurdity of the process in which you've been forced to spend valuable time and resources. I know that this commission and your staff recognize the value of Jockey's Ridge and will take the necessary steps to protect it. That is, you will if you're left alone to do the job for which this commission was created. In the 1970s, our state saw the need to protect our fragile coastal environment and established the Coastal Resources Commission and gave you the authority to establish AECs and promulgate the rules to protect them. But now, ideological forces that value unrestrained and excessive commerce supported by industries that are biased against environmental regulation want to erode your authority. You don't really need evidence today to prove that Jockey's Ridge deserves protection. You need our support and the freedom to do your assigned and righteous task. And you have mine and the town of Nags Head's in full. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak during this public hearing today? Now is the opportunity if anyone wishes to take it up. Seeing none, the public hearing is now closed. Daniel?
Are we back on man-made ditches?
Yes, we're getting ready to go back to man-made ditches, yes.
Okay, I just wanted to comment on Commissioner Tennessee's comment. So these wetlands, these coastal wetlands are what you would find at the bottom of the system, where like the Sackett case would be more at the top of the system. So the feds would have jurisdiction over the coastal wetlands, but coastal wetlands are by default in immediate proximity to the waterway. So you wouldn't find like a coastal wetland being involved in the same kind of discussion and process of isolated wetlands and federal wetlands that are much farther up in the system than this. So I just wanted to kind of speak to like the federal law being more stringent than the state law or vice versa. Like that really doesn't come into play with the location of these type of wetlands. Does that make sense?
I have to think on it a little bit more.
Okay.
Questions for Daniel? Larry?
Presentation was very good as usual. There is a lot going on at the federal level regarding wetlands, and it was basically due to the mentioned Sackett case. And it will have a significant change on what is defined as jurisdictional 404 federal wetlands. But I think I just saw a recent article written by environmental lawyer, and I think it's very pertinent that in North Carolina, because in this article, they pointed out that the states can always adopt stricter rules than the federal government can. And so regardless of what they do with this Sackett or what is a 404 wetlands, there's a lot of different types of wetlands. Coastal wetlands are another set of wetlands that are defined by North Carolina general statutes, and they should still stay under jurisdiction under whatever the general statute allows us to do, and also what our rules specify on that. So because it is a separate general statute. But back to the Sackett federal 404 case, it will have significant difference. There will be what they call waters of the U.S., which are navigable waters, which is sort of the criteria that was mentioned. If it's navigable by a kayak, that has been through many cases, that's navigable. And so that's basically a public trust waters. Where it really changes is the adjacent wetlands to those waters of the U.S. What Sackett did at the federal level basically stated that the wetlands have to be inundated. They have to be indistinguishable from the adjacent body of water, which is a huge difference. And those, it is confusing. The maps you put up, where jurisdiction stops or begins, or our buffer areas, it's going to be a little confusing, but it's going to put more weight, especially on the coastal wetlands, on CAMA and CAMA staff to define those type of situations. The important thing is going to be the normal high water mark. That's something that also is recognized by law, by statute, by property ownership, is the normal high water mark. And whether it's tidal influence or coastal waters, that's going to be big issues, I think. And there will be contestments, I think, in the future on that. But for CAMA, we do have separate general statutes, and that's along with other general statutes of the Tar River, Albemarle buffer rules. Those come into play, but it's all defined by the normal high water mark. And that's not as easy to define as just saying that, going out there looking at it. Surveyors have a hard time defining it, even by doing geodetic surveys. So it will be a point of contestment in the future, but I'm somewhat glad we've got separate general statutes regarding coastal wetlands, but very good presentation.
Neil?
Yeah, so I want to go back to the navigable situation. So if, I'm looking at Oak Island right now specifically. So there's, I think it's called Montgomery Slough that comes in on the north side of Oak Island. And so obviously that's navigable. Then it hits, there's a street called 40th Street where there's a canal, drainage ditch, I'm not sure what exactly you would call it, that continues headed east of 40th Street. but there's a culvert of some sort that connects the slough to the drainage ditch. So let's say hypothetically, a kayak could get into the drainage ditch on the east side of the street, but there's a culvert separating two. Is that still considered navigable waters if they have to, paddle their kayak a block and then pick it up, go over the street and paddle it a block? And
Yes, in fact, I think that's in the case law where the kayak was.
Yeah. One of the cases that was referenced there does allow for portaging. So it's a whole public trust navigability is all dictated by common law. So there's a number of cases that we could look at if you want to get deeper down that rabbit hole.
so the rules are based on legal precedent in that situation.
The public trust area is dictated largely by common law, by case law.
Right. Okay. So another situation at Oak Island this time, if you live on, say, Montgomery Slough, is your northern boundary, and then the town digs a drainage ditch on your western or eastern boundary that connects into the slough. And over time, some coastal wetland characteristics show up because maybe they dug the ditch too deep or it's been there so long, that then triggers it to be considered public trust AEC?
It would be considered coastal wetlands.
Or coastal wetlands?
I mean, coastal
Right.
wetlands, if it meets the definition of coastal wetlands, it would be considered coastal wetland. Now, that doesn't mean that any proposal, it just means that we would say there's coastal wetlands there. If you have a proposal to fill those coastal wetlands or a proposal that's going to significantly adverse impact those, it would be addressed in the permitting process.
I think the bigger issue for some of these property owners is now the setback that kicks in from a coastal wetland. So now they've got a setback coming
Yeah.
from the slough, and now they got a setback coming in from the.
And we had a third-party contested case maybe a couple of years ago from up north in the canal system in Currituck County where somebody was dredging out part of their property, and that shifted the 30-foot buffer now onto the neighbor's property. And what do you do there? So it's pretty site-specific.
Right.
It's hard to answer broadly,
Right.
but yes, we've seen that situation a few times.
I'd like to clarify real quick, though, if it's coastal wetlands are present, there's no 30-foot buffer or 75-foot AEC. That's
Okay.
That's only whether or not it's considered a public trust AEC, therefore going in, and then you would have the 30-foot buffer and 75-foot
Okay.
jurisdiction. The jurisdiction, if coastal wetlands are present, is the coastal wetlands itself.
Okay, so there's no setback from a coastal wetland. You just can't fill it or excavate it without
That's correct.
proper
If
approval.
we go to a man-made ditch canal and it's navigable, we're calling it public trust now, and that's when you're gonna have the 30-foot buffer, the 75-foot AEC. If there's just coastal wetlands present, we just cannot impact those coastal wetlands if they're present and meet all those indicators that are within
Yeah.
the definition.
And that's two different AECs. The public
Right.
trust areas is from in the water.
Right.
The public trust shoreline would be 30 feet from the high water line.
Okay.
Jordan?
So is that in the rule or in the statute on the buffer for a coastal wetland?
That's in our public trust or,
There's no buffer for coastal wetland.
did you say coastal wetlands?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just not in our rule. So it
Okay, so
doesn't
it's not
apply.
in the rule.
That's right.
Buffer comes from the normal high water mark, is that correct?
Or normal water level.
Or normal, yeah, whatever, yeah.
Any other questions on this subject? If not, thank you both. Thank you all for that. Jordan?
So was this just
This was informational.
Okay.
No action was taken. Discussion only. I'm going to use a little poetic license, Daniel. Don't leave. I see somebody that wanted to speak during the public hearing. So I'm going to reopen the public hearing for another speaker as it relates to Jockey's Ridge. Michael, you're running late.
State your name and all that.
Yes, I am. I do apologize greatly. Michael Bass Knight, here as not only a resident, Manio, longtime native of the Outer Banks. I guess that goes without saying, the two, and also town commissioner of Manio. Specific to AEC, being put back in place in protection of Jockey's Ridge. I'm sure many have said here before I was shown up today, but I think not only are there monuments and vestiges here on the Outer Banks that have been put by man, but also something that was put here much longer than when we arrived. Not only is it something of a testament to the locals, but I do believe it's also a draw, quite a significant draw. I see that at both the house that I have here in Manio, when visitors come, or at the Pioneer Theater. I'll hear them talk often of the fond memories they had at their experience at Jockey's Ridge. And I can tell you right now, from all of us, it's very important to maintain that. So I just wanted to give my 2 cents of support for this today. I do apologize for my tardy. I will say, in context, I'm wearing red today. I have my oldest daughter who's graduating from NC State this weekend. My youngest, just 20 minutes ago, signed declaration for state. So I've got 2 North Carolina college kids. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time, your consideration for this, because it truly does matter to us who are here and those who visit. So thank you.
Thank you, Michael. I'll give any more opportunity to speak. Seeing none, public hearing is now closed. Is there any other business to come before us today? If not, we will adjourn until tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. One thing I would like to know from the commission, who plans on going on the field trip tomorrow afternoon? Okay. All right. Robbie. Everybody but Mr. King and Commissioner Yates and Commissioner Andrew. Okay. I just wanted to be able to give the manager, county manager, kind of a heads up. Thank you all very much. We're done. I'm ready.